Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. I'm really pleased to present Adham Shaikh, longtime producer and engineer, uh, field recordist, producer, uh, sound supervisor, sound spotter. Probably you probably do it all, right? I really thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate you coming on.
It's great to be here, Tim. Nice to see
Yeah,
you.
cool. It's good to see you, man. You've been so busy lately. It's been a couple months since we caught up.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the life of an artist is go go go. You sort of have to keep the momentum going to survive in this day and age as an artist, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, before we kind of get back into your early childhood and, through years, we had an interview a couple years ago with the Vancouver record store Audio Pile, and there was a couple things that you touched on that, I recently reloaded it up to my channel, that interview and that sort of 2 hour special sort of on your music and the label. And there's a few things that you touched on that I would really love to dig in to a little bit more, just the whole Vancouver scene and that kind of cassette culture and in that time. But before we get into that, I think maybe you have to just kind of tell us what you're up to. You don't have to tell us what your future is, but what have you been up to the last couple of years since we last talked?
Well, I've been kind of splitting my time between working for my friends Ocean Legacy Foundation, who are a nonprofit on the coast that have been doing coastal marine cleanups. And so I've been helping them, going out on cleanup operations and kind of manning cameras and filming them and making videos for them and, helping them with media and just capturing and documenting all their cleanups and stuff. And just been working on music and producing lots of stuff for other people. So I currently have 6 artists under production, all in various states of thing from folk to, more contemporary kind of stuff. I'm producing an Afro-Colombian band right now who are all kind of close to the Kootenays area now, and so I've been helping them since December record their first album, and they're like a 5-6 piece Afro-Colombian band with members from Argentina and Colombia and Venezuela and Mexico, and so that's been really fun. We're just in the sort of final phase now on the last 2 songs that we're doing mixes for. They're going to release it in August, and I'm releasing that on my album. I've been working for a Dutch composer, Yogi, who I've been helping him with a bunch of songs, and we're about to release one of his on my label. And yeah, just been kind of hustling along, playing the odd little DJ show here and there, and
Yeah.
working on. I've got a bunch of my own songs in the pipe, and been editing some music videos now, and doing the frame by frame renders and After Effects. And like, there was one I started the other day. It took 3 days just to sort of get the results out, which is, quite an adventure.
Wow, wow. I got some questions for all that information you just gave us. Are you the band that you're helping with recording is that a different studio? Is that in your
No,
own
that's my
studio?
studio right here. You can kind of
Okay.
see I've expanded it, and I have all the equipment, and we're out in the country, so it's pretty quiet here. So we get pretty good sound, and I've got some nice preamps and mics, and so everybody's
Wow.
been coming here. And the odd thing, I think they had some guitars that were done by a friend who was in Argentina, and so there have been files that have also arrived to add to the sessions, but most of the primary drums and vocals and stuff have been done here. They're actually coming this Sunday again to do some new vocals on one of the songs where we just got pianos and guitars, which kind of changed the vibe a bit more. So this record, final vocals now that the rest of the stuff's in place.
Fantastic. Wow, that's great. And that's all going to be coming out on your Sonic Turtle label?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Very excited about that. It's kind
Awesome.
of funny. Almost feel like I need to change the name of my label from Sonicturtle to Titanic Records, as it feels like kind of comical to be releasing music at the end of recorded music as AI is replacing everything, and there's so much fake music being uploaded on a daily to all the streaming services that it feels like recording and releasing real human generated created music is kind of like throwing a pebble onto the beach. But I'm moved by real music by real people, and I have a connection into the Sony Orchard umbrella, so I have my digital distributor is really good, and so I've been kind of offering that service now to all these like smaller independent artists who don't
Oh,
have access to that. So we've been just like running it through my
I
label.
might need your help with on that.
Yeah, no, Sony's been great. I've been really pleased with
That's
their
fantastic.
distribution, and they're one of the few majors right now who haven't sold out their catalogs for AI data training, like Universal and Warner, and there are some others that are kind of. So that's an interesting thing too. So far, anyway, these big guys, they
Yeah.
get their offers, they make their own decisions, but for now, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into that now, but I do have some
That's a
questions.
whole other topic.
Yeah, I do have some questions about, you mentioned AI and things like that, and I wanted to get your opinion on, but don't want to get there just yet. But
Yeah,
we'll come back to
we'll
that.
go
But
chronological a bit.
yeah, well, that's exciting. With you, are you still doing some music for some shows, documentaries? That's kind of the last thing I remember you
Yeah,
doing.
the last thing I finished a year-long project, which got aired on The Nature of Things here in Canada. PBS is airing it in the States, and Arte in France and Germany. And yeah, that was a very exciting project. It was in 29 countries, so I got called on to kind of create musical vibes that were representative of Colombia and Madagascar and Bali and
Oh,
Japan and all of that. And so that was really exciting to connect with the ethnic side of those cultures and help paint that kind of texture without being too on the nose. Was the description from the creators, and that was a really fun project.
yeah. Well, every time I check in with you, or I see you post something on Facebook, I know with the fires that you had last year.
Oh, that was
um,
2 years ago. That was right in the
Dude.
middle of that film, and yeah, I had to pack up my studio and head down the road to my friends and set up. They run a clothing business, Nomads Clothing, and
Okay.
so they have like a little warehouse building at the bottom of their property, and so I sort of set up in the corner of their building and kept going. Like I wasn't allowed to be down for more than about 12 hours. We were in the middle of deliveries for one of the episodes, so I was rendering files and outputting stems and doing, and so yeah, that was a intense time. That was the first time I've ever been evacuated, and it was a surreal moment.
Yeah. How's that like working in that, trying to work in that? I mean, let alone your
Yeah,
family life.
it was a little distracting, and then kind of thinking about that. But it was interesting how, other than some of my studio stuff in this massive suitcase that has all my hard drives, I already have them sort of in a bug out box. I've always kept kind of all my backup hard drives in a bag that you could just give, and my son has instructions: if I'm not here and something happens, don't leave without that box. So once I knew that that stuff was secure, I mean, I wasn't that attached to equipment. Whatever, you can get more equipment. um, our house, we love our house, but hey man, if it burned down, we'd build another one, like whatever. And I was surprised at how I wasn't that attached to the stuff once we knew the kids were okay and the pets, like, you know that
Yeah.
was sort of an interesting exercise in the lessons of attachment. I guess as a musician, and probably other musicians out there can relate, we have an experience with the Buddhist lessons of attachment when you lose a hard drive and you lose a bunch of files and stuff, and when you have to just let stuff go. And sort of, I'm at that place, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it was an interesting process.
I'm sure you saw a lot of good human spirit come together in a tough time. I'm sure because
Well, we're
you were deep
blessed.
in it.
Yeah, we're blessed to live in a really amazing community, and everybody just really rallies together, and everybody was helping each other, and we were going around and helping other people evacuate their stuff. And I think at the peak there were probably three or four groups of people that were all staying down at my friends, in RVs and campers and things. So it was a fun little vibe for a moment.
Yeah, I got a chance to. I think I told you before, but I got a chance to come up to Vancouver when I was a kid in 1986 and went to the World Expo there,
Okay.
and we stayed with people we never even met for 4 days. Four kids, two parents, and everybody was so nice in the area. It was just one of the, we went to a hockey game, went to a Canucks game, we went
Oh,
to,
nice.
Bouchard Gardens. We just it was such a beautiful area, and I mean, just thinking of a fire there must have been pretty extraordinary. But it looks like the nature's coming back, and
Nature's coming back. You can
uh,
definitely see the scars on the mountain where the fire ripped through, and then they made these fire break burns where they burned a bunch of stuff to kind of, make these fire breaks, and so those are kind of intense looking, but it's nature. It'll grow back, and I mean, in the previous eras when the indigenous people used to live here in lots of areas, they used to do controlled burns and they would manage the forest in ways that kind of safeguarded against these epic things. I think climate change is a bit monoculture reforestation from the last 100 years of logging all around here hasn't helped. And then I think that the pine beetle, which was another thing that kind of spread through a lot of these pine forests. And so there's a lot of dead standing forest. And then because of our current fire mitigation practices, which are about putting them out and fire's bad and all of that, that I think the forests aren't in the healthiest place they could be. So now when these fires and these lightning strikes happen, when the forests are drier, these fires can get a lot bigger. And so yeah, it's a complicated issue that's built on layers of past stuff. And so we are where we are. And luckily no one really, there's only two or three houses that were lost in this fire, and it was pretty dramatic. Like, it was from the valley where we are, and the town sits sort of at the bottom of the lake at the top of the valley, and the fire was just moving up to the town. And yeah, it was surreal. It
yeah,
was
growing up in the Los Angeles forest, well, I had a lot of friends that became firefighters. And
okay.
hopefully, with the fires they had in Los Angeles,
Oh,
last time, hopefully you guys don't have budget cuts, and they know the importance of, putting money into to the fire fighters and that whole system, and keep that supported.
yep, yep. It's definitely one of the issues facing us in our communities. But I think out of that, there became like some independent, like volunteer fire brigades in a lot of little communities where people have really stepped up and are participating more in, the local community response. And so, yeah, there's been some positive things that have come out of it too. So,
That's great.
onward and upward.
That's good, man. I'm glad to hear that. Glad
Yeah.
everything was okay for you in the end. That's
Yep. And
yeah.
we've had a good wet spring so far. Everything's super green and we're in a good place. Usually by this time in BC there's hundreds of fires going all over the place, and so far I think we're less than 20. So that's positive. And yeah, one day at a time. I definitely love the rain a lot more. In the old days, I used to, oh no, it's raining. I want sunny weather. And now I'm like, yay, it's raining. A lot happier
Yeah, I
for it.
know, right?
And it becomes guilt-free studio days. I don't feel so bad at staying in the studio and working when it's raining outside.
Right, right. Or watching a good movie, or just enjoying
Yeah, well,
inside.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
good
more
stuff, man.
studio time. I work, from 10 in the morning till 10 at night most days. So
That's good, man. And that's one thing I took away from the conversation we had with the record store is you've been an artist employed by yourself for 30, almost 40 years now.
yeah,
That not,
yeah,
not a lot of people can say that.
yeah. Well, I'm obsessive and driven, and I recognize that work ethic was one of the parts of the many pieces of how to be a independent artist, and keep doing it, learning more about the business side of stuff,
Yeah.
keeping all your rights, and just working all the
You've
time.
differentiated yourself really well with the producing, the music supervision, I mean,
Well, it's lots of hats that I think most musicians can attest that when you love music, you're doing anything and everything within that field, from DJing to doing sound at a venue to supporting other bands, being a roadie, like whatever.
Yeah.
It's all sort of in that umbrella. And for me now, it's branched out. I'm teaching. I have a bunch of students, so I'm trying to like share the different levels of information that I've absorbed, and
Mm.
helping other artists now producing their records and trying to teach them workflows and work ethic, and the how to nurture the passions that lots of different people feel when they get touched by
Yeah.
the music bug and they want to pursue it. So yeah, it's been really good.
That's fantastic, man. That's one great thing about you is you're always so passionate when you talk about music, and it always comes through when you're thinking about other people and stuff like that. So, but I'm gonna put you on the spot with the first question.
Okay.
Name your top five, or you can go top 10 albums from before 1990.
Oh. um
Any
well,
style.
any style. Well, I'm just trying to think. One of the ones, I mean, it had the most influence, and as cliche or whatever it sounds, I think was this record, Ralph and Florian. It was like the kind of predate first Kraftwerk album, and I remember finding that, and I was just captivated by the cover, in a record store hunting for stuff, and I found that, and I was just blown away by that and became like an instant Kraftwerk fan. And then I think I can't remember specific albums, but like I really got into Tangerine Dream in the early 80s too. And like just all of their stuff was incredible. And I'm trying to remember. It blurs a little bit,
If
but
you
there
tell me
was
the
an
years,
album.
I'll
Well, it
tell
was
you.
Brian Eno and Harold Budd, The Pearl. That
Oh,
I got that on vinyl, and that was another kind of super inspirational album. Uh, and then I used to collect, I was a huge Tears for Fears fan, and I got a bunch of their vinyls, and their B-sides were always amazing. I always really loved the B-sides on all those early Tears for Fears albums. I still have them all too. And so those were definitely, records that inspired me.
you started playing some instruments pretty early in your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I vaguely have the memory of basically kindergarten and the piano there, and I was just captivated with it. And shortly after that, my parents got a piano, and I started piano lessons, as early as I can remember. And so the piano was kind of always a part of my musical adventures. And then in grade 5, in the music room, they had a drum kit, and then I discovered the drums, and then sort of, I'm not the best drummer, but I was always gravitated to the drums. And like when I listen to music, drums are one of the things that I notice the most. Or when I love a song, often the drums are a huge part of that. So those were my two kind of main instruments. And then at 15, 16 years old was my first synthesizers, and that just began that whole journey of synthesizers and drum machines.
Gotcha.
uh,
And you were going to go to school in Toronto, right? For I forgot what the subject was, and you decided to come back for go to
well,
school,
no. Yeah,
or
actually, I got accepted to RMC. I was in Army Cadets when I was younger, and I really loved that whole journey. And I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. And I got accepted to RMC, which was the military college, and passed all the medicals. But then on the first day of school, when you arrive there, they do a more in-depth, like, eye test, and they discovered I was partially red-green colorblind. And so when I couldn't be a helicopter pilot, I didn't want to do that anymore, and pivoted into chemical engineering in Ottawa, actually at Carleton University. And then after doing a few years of that, realized that it wasn't really my path, and that I started really coming to the awareness that whatever it was that I was going to do in life, I really had to love it. And that was sort of, I remember actually getting drunk with my buddy George, and wandering around on the Parliament Hill, and like puking all over the side of they have this flame thing that's always lit. And I remember barfing on that and realizing that I had to tell my parents that I don't want to do chemical engineering, and that maybe I could go into music, because that was my other thing that I still love doing. And my parents were like, okay, well, then you got to go to Queen's University, or you got to go to university for that. And so I managed to pivot and get accepted to Queen's. And I did 3 years of a degree there, and sadly, basically interpreting my composition professor's comments that in third year electroacoustic composition is like, it can't really teach you how to write. It can teach you how to analyze what other people are doing, and but the only way to learn how to write is to get on and do it. Like, if you want to write music, then you got to start writing music. And so I kind of dropped out of school, got on a motorcycle, and drove to Vancouver, and started that journey of trying to be a electronic musician. And I'm still trying.
And where does your love for like field recording come from? Like, is that from those days? Like, you seem to be
I
somebody who's
think
out
that
there.
that a lot of some of that came like in the electroacoustic composition program. A lot was like tapes and field recordings where you had to find your own sounds, and so like we had these little Nagra tape decks and microphones, and we went out. And then that evolved in the early 90s with the advent of DAT recorders, and I had this like little digital audio, a little Sony DAT recorder and a microphone, and then I would just wander around doing field recordings. And then a trip to India in like 94, 95, that was where it really opened up, and just sort of the fusion of field recordings and ambient music seemed just like, the match made in heaven. And sort of the journey of listening to my environments and traveling around, kind of using a microphone as the navigating tool, and hearing like, you'd pan the mic and you'd like, oh, something sounds interesting over there. Okay, I'll go that way. And sort of that was the real incorporation of that stuff into my music. And so Journey to the Sun, and then the Drift record that I made with Tim Floyd, which I see you have in your little corner there, was him discovering field recording with me. And we would go out into the woods, and he'd skip down a mountain and I'd be recording it, or we'd be finding these trippy resonant trees that he knew, or we found this old abandoned cistern, like a big concrete water, tank in the forest somewhere. And so we climbed down in and had metal rungs. So we were banging patterns on the rungs. And like when you stood on the side and made sounds, it would like do these like phaser kind of sounds as the sound would like spin around the concrete. And so it just became this, journey of the discovery of different sounds and things. And now we have these incredible little boxes that we can take and be mobile with our recording and video and audio. And like, I'm still doing that, recording streams and,
You know,
different nature sounds that
I
I
think I've always
find.
had a hard time like really putting a title on your music, because I feel like I don't know if I'd say ethnic, but with you having a Buddhist background, right? So it's, I don't know, like, what would you call that ambient side of, and then also you have a dub side, and then you have a Buddhist side. So those three are, I feel like, are very
Yeah,
pivotal to the organic feel of your sound.
perhaps. I mean, I don't know. Someone told me this once years ago, actually, when I was hanging out with my friend Tim on Lummi Island, and we met this like old eccentric dude, and he just told me, don't label your stuff, don't think about it, and don't look back. Like, put it out and keep going. Like, don't pay attention to what anybody says about it. Just kind of like be in the moment and don't worry. And labels of what it is, like, I don't know. I just try to write music. I try to find inspiration, and it's sort of like surfing a wave, and you catch a wave, so you keep surfing on those waves. And I guess the music is the diary, or the record of those adventures. But like, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just drawn to whatever it is that compels me by this sound or that noise. Or, oh, I remember in India, I arrived on this one street, and it was sort of like a street market, but everybody was kind of in their own little booths, but chanting in the same larger kind of pulse, like everybody da-da-da, da-da-da, and people would be holding up their shirts, and then the next guy would be like in the off beats of the other guy, he'd be doing his little thing. And there was this whole, I'll share you the recording, we can stick it in, maybe in behind here, but it was just like the most incredible thing I ever heard. And I never thought of that before. I'd never experienced a street market, but then just to see this whole street all chanting in kind of different parts of the same song like a caterpillar, and you just walked down this street
Was it on
recording all this
purpose?
vibe. Yeah, they're like,
Oh,
just
wow.
that's how they did it. They were all part of the singing. I mean, I guess it would be the same as like, maybe, in the old days when people were working on the rail line, they would start singing songs and like just being a part of this larger thing while you were working. And that to me felt like what that street was. And I was blown away by that. And that became, a little part of a song that then grew out around it when I sample that, and then suddenly sounds started sticking to it. And so it's always just been in the pursuit of interesting sonics, and then whatever journeys occur from that.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And where did your love for or your interest start with dub music? Is that from just albums, or is that from a friend, or is that just from percussion? Is that
um I think it was kind of from just that love of this big round fat bass sounds and just those tones, and like listening to a lot of early dub, and then seeing how artists like the Orb and a lot of these down tempo artists were incorporating these kind of bass lines that kind of came from reggae and dub with electronics and stuff, that it really spoke to me, and I felt connected to that. And I find like even now when I'm playing live, I typically gravitate to being the bass player in the project, and I do the bass and manipulate Ableton for the drums. And so I also always was drawn to that part of the sound. And yeah, I don't know. There's something soothing about just these big bass lines, and I think being in charge of the bass, you can shift bass notes around and can totally change contextually how those chords are, or you can change the feeling of a chord just by what note you anchor at the bass, and it has more influence in a way, or I always felt, than coming up with another fancy jazz chord or something where I could just shift the bass down a fifth and suddenly that chord changes. And so that also drew me to that process. And yeah, just big round fat bass sounds.
all right? Just wanted to pivot a little bit to kind of the history of Vancouver, like when you were maybe like 87 to like 92, right before you started recording, when you're building your studio, and that whole kind of scene. You kind of talked a little bit about in the conversation we had previously, but I wanted to really kind of get in depth there because I found it so fascinating, because just the cassette culture, you learning about music, the people around you, and some of those people that are still doing music today. Can you tell us a little bit about that time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it started with like being a fan of music that was released by this independent West Coast record label, Network Records, and kind of a whole bunch of music that I was kind of digging, from like early Skinny Puppy and MC 900 Foot Jesus, and like there was all this interesting stuff. And they were also the Canadian distributor or licensed in, so like a bunch of other electronic stuff. I think they released some Ministry and some Front 242 and all that. And so in the kind of mid late 80s, I was sort of, my electronic journey had evolved from Kraftwerk into also, it was listening actually to a CBC radio program called Brave New Waves with Brent Bambury. And I used to go to bed with my sort of finger on pause in my little cassette radio. And if I'd hear two bars of something that was electronic, I would like, unpause and record. And then I would start recording these things. And then I would go into the record store and play back because sometimes they wouldn't even announce like what the thing was, or they would say what it was after 20 songs, and you'd forget, and you'd go in like, hey, do you know what this is? Have you heard this? And you'd track down these records, and it started coming up like, oh wow, this Network Records. And it's like, well, I guess maybe I need to move to the West Coast then if I'm going to pursue electronic music. It seemed like Vancouver or the West Coast was where there was a more interesting alternative electronic. It seemed like the electronic scene and the like punk rock scene or something were overlapping, and there was this kind of energy and rawness. And so that was what initially drew me west. And then got a job working at a music store, in the keyboard department, selling keyboards and stuff. And that was sort of where he started meeting other electronic artists and other people that were, making music with electronics and stuff. And, there was one couple in particular, Dan and Christine, that used to come into the record store, and they'd be all dressed in leather and stuff, looked like they just stepped off a private jet to a rock concert. And they were really sweet. And we sort of began connecting, and through working at the store, there was another guy that worked there, and sort of we became roommates. And he had a project with another friend, the couple guys from Edmonton, Chris Dempsey and Steve Keddy. And Steve was like a DJ as well, and he was like, collecting all the latest kind of underground electronic records, and that sort of like was a further kind of tap into hearing like what was going on in Europe. He was the first one that brought home the Big Chill, the KLF record, and the first Orb and Orbital and 808 State and all this kind of up and coming UK electronic stuff that we really resonated with. That, and the fact that at that point the digital revolution really hadn't started. So like when we were making songs with our MIDI, with our little computers and our MIDI sequencers, we were kind of doing our mix downs onto cassette, because that's all there was. And so we had some expensive cassette decks, and like at one point I had a double, so you could like make your master and then you could make dupes of them. And I had a friend who worked across the hall at the Sony store, and he used to give me deals on boxes of cassette tapes. And so suddenly that became like, oh, we could make this music and I could record it. And then we were finding out where all the underground parties were, and then sometimes my friend was playing at them. And then that sort of became us being part of the chill out rooms, because we were all kind of experimenting. It wasn't really dance music that we were doing. It was sort of slower than dance music, and like the chill out room became the easiest place to sort of get a spot. And so then that became like, oh, selling, mixes, or we'd record the sets that we were playing in these ambient rooms, and then we would sell them at the next one. And that sort of became the start of I guess the cassette culture and trading cassettes. And like, I don't know how many cassettes I made. And there was one in particular where I had gone to the library and found a whole bunch of like ethnic CDs and like Buddhist chants and like monks chanting and nature things. And we were just kind of paying no attention to copyright, just running, a CD player through a delay pedal and then record, having that on a mixer fader and just jamming and creating this stuff. And those became these ambient cassettes that we sold. And Earth was the one that I did really well with, that a lot of people started telling me that that was the thing that they would put on after they'd gone out dancing all night and they were back at their place chilling out. And so that was, I guess, the birth of all of that stuff.
You said there was a name on one, Earth?
Earth was the one that I did that was really popular. I think someone I saw there's like some of it up on YouTube now. I think if you type Earth and Adham Shaikh, I think one of the sides of one of those cassettes is up on YouTube. I no longer I have a digital DAT master. I transferred the cassette to the DAT, but sadly the DATs they did not survive the test of time. Now there's so much digital dropouts and stuff, and unfortunately with DATs, when you get digital dropouts, it all just turns to kind of digital static noise, whereas like all my old cassettes, they still play fine.
I know.
So that's kind of the digital and analog kind of thing.
Yeah, once those DATs don't the DAT players don't read it, it's
yeah. Yeah,
I don't know.
they don't sound good. And so I've got boxes of DATs that sadly are,
That was like the major audio backup source in the 90s
yeah,
for audio
I
engineers and
archived everything to
shows,
that.
voiceovers. Like,
And I
oh,
didn't notice early enough. I think in the late 90s would have been my time. I should have recorded all those DATs into the computer and then like burnt them as data discs, in CD and DVD data discs, because those
uh,
things I still have all my archives of all that stuff. But
shoot, I still
yeah.
have some D88s.
Oh yeah, there you go. They might have fared better, but the DATs, because it was just 2 track, like it, yeah, when they went, they went.
Yeah, and most people were getting 120 minutes, and it was just probably compacted and
Yeah.
soiled. That's too bad. Uh, so you were selling those tapes for like you said, like to
Yeah, I
make
mean, I'd
ends meet.
probably like 10 or 20 a week. And
Mm.
then with the ones where it was all our own original music, because sometimes we do like we'd make ambient DJ mixes and record those, and then sell those too, like $10 or whatever. But the ones that were our own original music, then there was this one little used record store on Davie Street, Otis Records, and Todd, like he was just a champion of all of us little independent electronic artists, and he would always buy them off us at like decent prices. That really was a part of our survival back then. And then when I made my first CD realignment, he bought those on a regular, like he probably sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And like in fact, I think I was in there on one day bringing in 10 more in like 1993, 1994. And I met this guy, Andrew Ross Collins, who at the time had played a big rave or something and was just looking for records. And I met him, and he was like, introduced himself and said he was a fan and he'd heard my album, and that, one day he was going to make a record label, and could he reach out to me? Would I be interested in, sending him a song? And then I think it was like in 96 or 97 maybe, I got a call from them saying, hey, we're going to make a compilation, and would you like to write a song for it? And I was like, oh, sure. And I wrote a song, and that was their first release, Northern Circuits, in 97. And that sort of began my whole journey with Interchill Records, and writing and releasing stuff with those guys, and moving to Montreal and living with them in their loft, for a couple years. And that was a super fun time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really strong producers. I mean, Phil Western sadly left us, but Nivek Org, I mean Kevin Key. I'm sorry.
Yes.
God, there's Alien Sex Fiends. There's
Yeah, and we knew all of those guys. It was a small community in Vancouver, and there was like one warehouse down in Gastown with these 5 floors. And our friends Bruce Young and Mike Victory, they had this project called Intersect, and they lived on a floor. And then it was like one of those old school elevators, you lift the gate and it kind of trundles up to the next floor. And then on the next floor, we're in a couple cats. And then Phil Western had a little studio on one of those levels too. And so we'd often, because the club that my friend Steve would play at was also in Gastown. And so often after the club, we'd go and hang out with those guys and smoke weed and listen to the latest mixes that those guys were doing. And then my buddies Dan and Christine, like we formed a project called X Drone. And
that's Dan from Off and Gone and Dream Logic, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
from Outer Sanctum.
Yeah.
And so we made a little project, and we were kind of messing around with like acid techno, experimental kind of stuff. Because during that time, myself and Steve and Chris had moved into this concrete apartment building down on West Georgia, and it was soundproof. We could make so much noise in there. No one ever said anything. It was big, thick concrete walls. And so we started a series called the Energy Dome, where that was the name of, we called our apartment the Energy Dome. But like once a month, like 4 or 5 of us, we'd get together and we'd all pile our equipment into the living room. Well, me and Chris had our gear already set up there, but then all these people would come, and Stefan Novak, Pilgrims of the Mind, was one of those people. And we'd come and we'd like ingest psychedelic substances, and we would just jam all night. And then Steve would play records in the morning, and we would do that probably once a month for years. And through that really sort of birthed a lot of that stuff. Phil came over, and Bruce and all those guys would come at different times and be part of these jams, and we'd record them all on cassette. I would record them all on cassette. Sadly, I lent the archive out to one of the people, and it just sort of, it never came back. But a lot of those cassette recordings, we would then sample them, and those samples would then become parts of songs that we were making. And yeah, it was a really magical time. And then sometimes we'd have guests, friends would just come and hang out while we were jamming and stuff. And yeah, they were pretty special moments.
That's interesting because, I was going through your discography yesterday just to kind of remember certain parts along the way when I was listening to your music. And one popped up that I had no idea. And then you just mentioned it, the Outer Sanctum compilation. So I found that at some, secondhand store, probably back in like 2003.
Mm.
And I had no idea till I looked yesterday and saw that you did a
Oh,
song
yeah.
on it. And so I did a review on Discogs probably like 15 years ago.
Oh,
A
okay.
lot of people saw my review, and that, I don't know if you know, but that ended up getting reissued in 2020, but they didn't put your song on there.
Oh, yeah. Maybe.
So
Yeah.
it
I
was,
don't.
yeah, it was some sort of like, it was like I think it was a Russian label, or maybe it was
Oh,
from
okay.
Ukraine. I have a copy. I still haven't listened to it yet
Maybe
because
Romania, because yeah, Dan and Christine, who lived in Vancouver, they were from Romania, and they since moved back. Dan had gone on and done a bunch of different projects. He did excuse me, he did a really cool project with Phil Western, and he also did another project called Weed, which actually Network Records ended up releasing. And then they messed around in Vancouver for a while, but as most of us discovered, Vancouver was a tricky. It was easy to be an underground artist, but it was hard to kind of make it to that next level where maybe the abundance flowed a bit more. We were also kind of pioneers of the electronic scene in the West. And there wasn't like we were all doing it for the love, or we'd play an ambient party and, make $100 or something. And you'd take your whole studio apart in 2 days of, work kind of to go make this $100. And so the economy of it wasn't there to the same way now. The festival culture and scenes, and like there are people that can, make six figures in this craft if they're really good, and they connect with the moment, and they have a team, and they're able to surf those waves. But back then it was very underground, and so most of us were still doing it because we loved it. And but Dan and Christine went back to Romania, and I know that he re-released a bunch of old stuff, and that might be why my song fell off the list, just because he had all the rights to all the other stuff, because they were mostly all different monikers of different projects that were his.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah. I find the scene so fascinating because it totally aligns with my music taste. So my upbringing of the industrial, my love of ambient, the cassette trading, and then I've been to the city when I was my favorite trip. So just everything,
yeah.
about that time is
Yeah, well,
and
it
that
was a
period.
golden age of
Yeah.
electronic music in Vancouver. Like there were so many talented
Yeah.
electronic artists, and we were also benefiting from the cheap gear. Like
Yeah. I
it
mean,
was
you.
sort
That's what I
of
was gonna
right
mention.
at that era where, every Thursday this thing called the buy and sell would come out, and it was a used, like the classified ads basically of stuff, but it was its own dedicated kind of paper. And so every Thursday morning we'd wake up and run down to the store and grab the buy and sell, and you'd look and it'd be like, oh, a 909 drum machine for $150 in Surrey, which is like, a suburb way far away. Or like for me, I found there was a piano store in Surrey that had a Profit 5, and they dropped the price to like $200 with a hard case. And so I rushed out there, borrowed my friend's car and managed to buy that. And 303s and 808s and 909s and sequential circuits stuff, and like there was just all this gear. And so there was probably like 6 or 7 of us that would all be sort of racing each other to get these bits. And then as soon as we had them, we'd start sharing them around, and you're like, oh, you can borrow my drum machine, and let me borrow your keyboard, and we'd sample them and so there was a real community spirit, I think, as well, of all these artists. We were all supporting each other. We all dug each other's stuff, and like, yeah, it was a real golden age. And then Phil Western, of course, he was part of this Odyssey Records. He owned this record store, and so that was a hub where all the flyers and all the underground stuff would be coming out, and sort of that was the hub around which we started with the underground. And then the scenes, they split, but there were the techno people, and then there were the house people, and then there was like Tyler Status and Basic Records and all the house music and all those guys doing stuff. And then we were just kind of felt like we were more on the techno side and the trippier, more psychedelic, where the early house was, happier and like often was more in the gay bars, and the gay scene also kind of overlapped into the house scene. And the techno scene was in the rougher, sketchier warehouses that were, and sort of, but we were all kind of part of the same scene. There's small by comparative standards now, but yeah, it was a golden age.
That's fantastic. I've talked to Mr. Novak from Pilgrim's Mind,
yeah.
a few years ago, about maybe like 5 or 7 years ago, along with Robert Shea over the years.
He's starting to have a resurgence. I saw Stefan, he got booked to play as Pilgrim of the Mind this past winter or in the fall in Australia.
That's
and
fantastic.
He went and did a live show, and I just saw a Facebook post. I think he's doing a show at the end of this month in Vancouver. And so it seems like people are rediscovering the stuff that he did. He didn't pursue it as hard as like some of us did. Like, he also had a job and he had his other, things going on, but it seems like he's returning back. And I just replayed actually a couple of his songs, and I was blown away with how timeless they still sound fresh. And so I'm really excited to see, more work from Stefan, and hopefully he keeps going, because he was talented too.
Yeah, he sent me some records, and I was championing his stuff on Discogs, and I have like a few reviews on there, and people would contact me, and I was just watching the prices soar for his records because they were really rare. And then I think around like 2022 or 2023, it's the white one with his sort of it's like a blurred image of his
What's Your Shrine, I think was the name.
Yeah, I think that was the More House record.
Yeah.
Like that one got reissued with a European label, so a lot of people found his music, and I'm glad they did, because he's really talented. And it's funny you mention him, and then I was just about to touch on these.
Oh yeah.
So these are all your Dozier
organism. Yeah, that was like through meeting Bill and Reese, Frontline Assembly guys, and like they were sort of the established electronic artists that had made it. We sort of looked up to those guys like, oh wow, those guys are like legit. They got labels, and then they approached us like, as part of the electronic artists, like, we're making these compilations. You guys want to submit a song or something? And yeah,
those compilations are brilliant. I mean, because you do have it's a perfect snapshot of Vancouver.
Yeah,
because you got the industrial.
Yep.
Pilgrims in the Mines in there. You're in there. There's some other kind of ambient dub stuff. I mean, it's got that kind of industrial edge in there too. It's phenomenal. But what kind of blew me away about it is it's a German label. So were they into Front 242? Frontline Assembly, and that was the connection.
Yeah, I guess that's the connections that they had through all the different stuff that they were doing.
Probably through Network too, and
I would guess maybe through Network, or just Bill and Reese were releasing on lots of different things. They when we met them, it was sort of like we discovered, oh, these guys have like multiple different project names, and they're releasing under Delirium and Frontline Assembly and this thing and that thing. And like, we had never really thought of that ourselves. We were just kind of like releasing under whatever name we had a name, and that. So that was must be through connections of some of the stuff that they had done there. Yeah.
The Dozier stuff really kind of pushed you towards releasing Realignment.
Yeah.
Around that time, or this was just before.
Yeah, that was it's a bit blurry. It was sort of in that was 93, and I think we were working towards that. it was funny. Modulation electronic. That was always my dad's favorite. He was like, "That's I think the coolest name you ever
It is
came
cool.
up with for a
And the logo
thing." And
was
like,
great. And the
yeah,
logo was super
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So maybe I should re-release some of that older stuff, on there. I think the funny thing though is, and now you might have noticed it too, like with now all the new streaming services and things. If you start a new project or you come up with a new, it starts at zero. Like you don't just tap into like if I like we made a project called Monkey Dragon and which is kind of ska funk dub, and when we upload that to Spotify, Monkey Dragon, it's a brand new project, zero followers, zero any, and you're
Wow.
starting back at zero. So somehow starting a new name, you're kind of in the digital landscape, you're back to zero. And so, whereas, Adham Shaikh, if I release a song under Adham Shaikh, those 100,000 monthly followers are going to see it. I put out a Monkey Dragon, they don't see it, even though my name is tagged in there and it doesn't work the same. That was one of the sort of the Achilles heel I noticed of like new projects and new things. When you release them, it kind of starts off at zero. And so now that I've got 30 years of just Adham Shaikh, it just sort of seems easier now to just keep using that name. And even if it is upbeat or down tempo or whatever.
Yeah, that was kind of the 90s thing, right? I mean, having all the different
A
names
name,
and
a
everything.
project for every little different thing.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was talking to Dominic Ruzzi about that, and I mean and especially back like you were saying with Dan, like you were a lot of compilations with just one person under a bunch of different names, and they made the whole compilation themselves, and
Yeah,
he did a series of like that, so he has like 30 or 40 names.
but I could see
Schmidt did
how
that.
in almost like this multiple personality kind of way, you could also see how each of these different projects did have its own kind of vibe and sound and thing. And so I know back then it was sort of seemed logical to uh, give it its own little moniker so that you could organize that body of work in a way. Um, I don't know if we do that as much anymore. I think now an artist just tends to be their artist name and then they just release everything.
Yeah, I think now it goes
Uh,
more by the artwork, if that
mm,
makes sense. Because
totally.
if I saw your Bandcamp page and you had like a yellow thing and it said, some dubs, obviously I would know it was, dub, or if you put something on it
Right.
that's a little bit mystical, okay, I'm probably it's ambient dub or
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
trance,
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of the main way that I've always felt like artistically kind of trying to represent the music, and the album covers kind of like your moment to do that.
You go into Instinct Ambient in 94, roughly, Journey's Sun came out. You're probably most well known,
Yeah.
most respected,
Yeah.
amazing album.
Yeah. It was funny. Like we kind of, the electronic scene that I came up in the early 90s, it was kind of very anonymous. Like it wasn't about your name and like artists, like maybe you had a project name and stuff, but you didn't really put your picture. And like all the big raves and stuff, there was a name of a party, but there was no names of DJs on them, and it was an anonymous thing. And some of the first ones I went to, there'd be thousands, 5,000 people dancing in a warehouse, and you would dance at the speakers. And then like, oh, where's the DJ? Like, oh, they're off in a little corner somewhere, or they were up in a room, and they were so secondary to the experience. And then that kind of changed. And so, yeah, we never really took pictures. I never wanted to have my picture on an album cover. I also thought maybe too, because I wasn't a singer, that like maybe if you were a singer, it might make more sense to have your picture on the cover, but it was never really a thing. And I don't think I've ever had an album that's had my picture on it. So
Did you have input for the cover, at least,
a
even though
little
they had
bit,
their own
yeah, because
design?
I drew a pencil sketch of kind of like a mandala shape, very simple. This is a redesign now that my bro CJ on Beyond redesigned after I re-released that album on Interchill Records. But the original one, yeah, I think I just sent in a pencil sketch of sort of like a shape of like, oh, I want something like that. But then they created it and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I really like that. And so that was the
And
sort of the start
Instinct
of it
Ambient
all.
is probably my favorite ambient label of all time. It was so important for me because, I mean, I was 18 in '94. Their compilations, I mean,
Yeah,
your CD, the monthly series. Even still have the booklets where you can purchase them online, like you know, they would send out the booklets of all the new releases that came out and stuff. And
yeah.
I mean, just your album is, I mean, it's just pristine. It's an amazing
Amazing.
album.
Well, I owe
See,
that all to Michael Johnson, and he was my friend who I met, who worked at Network Records at the time, and then he became my manager. And he was a huge ambient head, and kind of followed all these different labels all over the place. And he told me about this label, Instinct Records, and he had met the guy Gerald Helm, who's the fellow that was running it, and they had a nice connection, and they introduced me, and like I was just working on some ambient music at the time. I think Millennia was the first song, and they were doing a compilation, and they were like, "Oh, do you have a song?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got this thing," and I sent it to them, and they loved it, and sort of that became the journey. And so that's a shout out to my friend Michael, because he was the really instrumental, and that was kind of like my first record deal. And it was back in the day. I think even Journey to the Sun, like there was a $5,000 advance, which was
oh,
just like mind blowing. And when I was a single person back in that day, that was a lot of money. And it was still at the more or less the 20-30% exchange rate that we're at even still now. And so yeah, that was a huge thing, that then, wow, an American label is interested in what I'm doing. And that really gave me some momentum and inspiration to continue the ambient thing. And that's what led to Drift, as I started recording music with this fellow Tim Floyd. And then when I sent Gerald some of those recordings, he was like, "Oh wow, this is awesome, and we should record that. We'll release that too." And that was those were
yeah,
two big records for me.
your tracks on on the compilations are excellent as well. And those ones I feel like should be on your keep talking.
Yeah,
Keep it back.
I'll have to dig back and go find all those. And yeah.
Well, if you need help, if you don't have them on CD, let me know. I'll burn them and send them to you if you need. But man, you just did so much good music down on that time. Just special memories because you solidified the sort of the sound of that label as far as the ethnic side.
Mm.
I feel like, or the true mysticism, because all the other people, no offense, they were mostly from New York or Caucasian, or but you kind of the glue into
Oh,
the.
interesting.
I felt like in the ambient dub part of the
Mm.
space music, because a lot of the other ones were more German or more New York, and you kind of brought a different flavor to
Mm.
so much talent on those. I still in a lot of contact with a lot of those people. Dietrich Schoenemann's my mastering engineer, Taylor Dupree. So I was just, and then Dominic Woozy pops up and we
Yeah.
start chatting again. And it's just inspirational times. And I just was such a huge collector of that label. And then you went to Interchill, which I found on accident with the the compilation you mentioned was
Northern
Magnetic North,
Circuits.
or
Northern Circuits was first,
yeah, right, yeah,
and then Magnetic Blue was
Magnetic North.
their second compilation
I got the
that I
name
had a
switched up.
couple. Yeah, yeah, and that they released, and that was the incredible curation of Gordon Field and Andrew Ross Collins. But Gordon was the kind of guy in the office, and Andrew was, he was living in the UK at the time and going at kind of half back and forth between the UK and Montreal. And yeah, they were another group of people that loved ambient music and the deeper, more thoughtful stuff. And I think Gordon's curation and his meeting all these different artists from all over the place and really, pulling things together, that they really connected with the kind of a more like a Canadian electronic artists, became their thing, where, in our earlier days, it was a lot of West Coast stuff where I was at. These guys were in Montreal and they were connecting to all the people in Toronto. And, I met a whole bunch of friends that I still have to this day, through connections with those guys.
That's awesome. There's a lot of good music on that label too. Um, do you have a favorite release on there? Like I know you were mentioned on a lot of compilations. In fact, it looks like they're still, or they sort of came back in recent years. And because I did see a compilation, I didn't go too much into their discography, but it looks like they've done one in the last couple of years. Looks like
Yeah, I
they're
think a few years ago they did one. Maybe it was just after the pandemic or something. I think Andrew put something together.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think through artists that I discovered through connecting with Interchill Records was a Montreal artist, Freeworm, and Vincent Letelier, and like just everything I heard that guy do was just when you would break it down to the individual parts, it was so simple, and it you would if you would hear one part, you're like, I'm not sure why that sticks out, but somehow the way he would put stuff together was just really compelling and captivating. And I think them and the Legion of Green Men guys, Lex and Rue out of Toronto, they were the other guys that when I started hearing their stuff on the Interchill Records releases, I really was inspired and have now become really good friends with both Lex and Rue. Anytime I go to Toronto now to play a show, I always go stay with Lex and we hang out. And you know,
Oh,
they have a great studio with like all the original vintage analog stuff. Like they still have all the classic analog stuff, and they're just whizzes in the studio manipulating all that stuff.
wow, that's great. And there was also was it Macchio or Mako?
Makio, yeah, I discovered Geo through actually rewinding now back to the release of the realignment CD, and Robert Shea had been working in California for 23 Degrees and one of the other labels, and I was meeting him in Vancouver, and he's like, "Oh, I know these guys down in the States. Maybe they would distribute some of your CDs." And then he gave me a compilation of this label, and that's when I heard it was like, "Who's this guy, Makio?" And it's kind of also resonated, and it was like kind of ethnic,
Mhm.
ambient, dub, down tempo stuff, and I just fell in love with his sound. And you know, like in 1993, 94, and you know, by 97, 98, when Interchill had released their CD, we had reached out to Geo also to contribute, and then I started becoming friends with Geo, and we'd chat and send messages back and forth, and you know, started discovering his sound. And then I was playing, you know, big parties in Montreal in the kind of chill out room side of stuff, and his music just became a huge staple in my DJ sets as well. And you know, fast forwarding even more, he started a record label, Dakini Records, and then when I released my Fusion album, he was the guy who stepped up and said I would love to release that into Japan. And then I got invited to go play because he did a series called Dakini Nights, where they would take over a venue and just decorate it all up, and they would have belly dancers and like live sarod and oud and tablas, and there's lots of Japanese that were going to study classical Indian music in India and coming back. And so there was a whole scene of kind of talented Japanese artists playing Indian instruments. And so he had kind of connected with all of them, and they were doing these amazing nights. And so I got to go and play one of these nights, and it was incredible. And so that began that whole friendship. Yeah, and that was from the connection through Robert Shea and that label
Wow.
in California.
That's fantastic. I was a big fan of Beyond Records and Waveform Records. And
Yes.
I know you have a track. I can't remember which compilation it was on Waveform, but the Interchill kind of took over as far as my favorite ambient dub
Oh
label,
yeah.
you know, in the mid 90s. They had some early vinyl releases also, and then they went into the more compilations, and you seem to be scattered amongst them. And then
Yep.
you know, that's kind of what drew me to the label was your name, because
Oh, neat.
you were the most recognized name that I
Yeah,
knew
they
of.
released so much great stuff. Yeah, I'm just a huge fan of everything Interchill did, and they were just such champions of me. Like they really put me forward, and you know, Andrew being the globetrotter that he was, you know, he knew he was kind of the first person. He was the first person to bring the orb to Canada. With he had a rave company, Big Bus, something or the other, and they were the sort of first people to book the Orb to Montreal back in the kind of mid '90s.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your DJing career, which is really
Okay.
cool because you're kind of the inspiration for all of us because us bedroom ambient DJs and chill out DJs don't get much places to play out. But how have you been able to stay visible and get booked? And it's just how's that all been? And tell me a little bit about your setup after that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm perhaps as curious as anyone else about how I've managed to keep doing this. I remember though in kind of it was like the mid '90s, and it was basically kind of when all the meth started showing up from Portland. All the DJs that were starting to come into Vancouver to play were kind of bringing that up. And then suddenly there was no more ambient rooms. And the ambient room, that third room at the party, suddenly became speed trance or tech, like high speed music. And then it started to be full of like little Japanese kids and like the sort of Asian influence who loved music, at like 20 beats per minute faster than what we were all kind of used to. And I think that and then doing events on a Saturday night, and we started noticing that people weren't necessarily coming out to chill out anymore like that they used to, and that chill out music was much more kind of something that people did at home. um, and I started discovering kind of ethno fusion musics that, had sounds from around the world was the stuff that I was drawn to. This is discovering, Makio stuff. And uh, I just started playing that, and I recognized early on that, like, oh, people, you got to throw a couple logs on the fire. Like, people need some beats, and it's actually the beats or the rhythm that are bringing people out and holding people's attention on the dance floor. And so that and the fusion of dub and like sort of dub influences, and you know on the reciprocal side of coming back to the West Coast after living in Montreal with the Interchill guys, and basically convincing them that they should move to the West Coast. The West Coast was where it was at, and Andrew kind of came out with his wife at the time, or girlfriend at the time, and they saw this beautiful property on Salt Spring Island, and then so they got a piece of property, and then that became the kind of landing spot for us as we moved back west. I was starting to DJ, more upbeat stuff, but ethnically inspired kind of music, and that no one else was doing that. And I think that was the thing that really made people want to book me. And as I was recognizing that, you got to put some logs on the fire and get a good rhythm going, and then incorporating live stuff and like drummers and other live musicians into this kind of hybrid DJ set where I'd even DJ, but then I would play some of my own songs that were more stripped down things that I could kind of jam with. And then having live musicians as a part of it gave a visually more interesting thing to watch, because I always found like watching a DJ kind of boring, and somehow we got stuck on the stage or in that central place. To me, having other things, dancers and other musicians, also made it more interesting, and sort of that became the root of a lot of the sound that I began collecting. And then of course the more you sort of look for those things, the more amazing ethnic artists you're finding. I discovered all the Asian underground stuff coming out of the UK, and there was all the music that Dakini Records was releasing, and there was a vibrant scene basically on the West Coast down in California and all that, of all this kind of fusion music. And so that just became a part of what I played, and kind of still is. I mean, now there's everybody and their mother's a DJ too, but that pursuing that sound, and then finding ethnic inspired music in bass music and in house and techno and jungle and drum and bass, that was my connective kind of thread that would let me weave these sets together. And people still are enjoying that.
Yeah, I would think you would be the ideal kind of. I mean, I've seen overseas, not so much here, although I've seen you mention a few of them, but some of these sort of festivals, I've seen like a mutual friend like Gabriel Lamar.
Oh, yep,
Yeah, I think
huge
I've seen
fan.
some of his that he's gone to, and he obviously does trance music, but he does some ambient music also. But I've seen some of the videos there, and
Oh,
they
I love the
have,
Safi Brothers stuff was amazing. Like,
yeah, yeah, for sure, like all the Blue Room release stuff, even. But like, oh man, you got me on a train of thought there
no,
with the Flying High records, Flying Rhino, and all
oh
those
yeah,
old Goa trance and stuff. But it seems like they're kind of doing some yoga outside and these really nice areas. It seems like the most ideal place to book somebody like you. But I haven't really seen anybody else do them besides the one that you posted. I think it was maybe a year or 2 years ago, and it looked really interesting. And I hope to see more of those. But do you remember which one that was that you were playing at? It was like a festival. It seemed like it was in the woods. Maybe I
that rules out a couple.
I wish I
Most
wish I
of
knew
them
them.
are a couple years ago.
It looked maybe
Uh,
less than a year ago, maybe around a year ago. I feel like it was in the past year, but I wish I knew the name. But it looked like it was well attended,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
was.
I mean, I play so many things it kind of blurs
So
as
you've been
to
playing a lot
which it
then.
might be. Well, yeah, and in most of the summers I'm out and about playing all over the place. And I think what I've loved in BC is that so many of the smaller communities kind of all, especially the further you get off the beaten path, when you go to their community to play music, everybody comes out like and really supports it, because not a lot of that would happen. And there are so many, iconic community halls and these old wood buildings and, things outside and sort of. But I think also in the last number of years, I've been rediscovering kind of the ecstatic dance communities. And for me, they seem to love my sound. There's also this more intentional kind of setting that people are coming to dance and be taken on a journey. It's not necessarily the social thing that a bar or a festival or another thing is, where you're also trying to keep people's attention and you're trying to, in a social setting that often also has alcohol and other things, you're one of many distracted things. Whereas these ecstatic dance things, people are coming specifically to dance and to be taken on a journey, and they're there to listen. And that permission, or that feeling of being received, just opens up a much deeper journey. And I've been really, some of my most profound musical exchanges now have been at these different ecstatic dance gatherings, because people are really there more intentionally. And sometimes there'll be opening circles and ohms and other things that also, sometimes serve to bring people together, or just to connect, or to slow down and take a moment to be present. And so a lot of these shows now, and there are these little festivals that happen in the woods for 300-400 people that are kind of, more intentional, and I've been really digging that. I also am always down for places that I've never played before, and places in interesting locations, like on a boat or often, a little island somewhere, or those things also grab my attention. Having done this for 30 years, like the big Ray, been there, done that, and they're fun, but I'm after interesting special moments. That to me is more interesting, and I find that often the musical exchanges are more um,
Special.
connective. Yeah.
Yeah, special. Yeah,
I feel more connected to the people.
that's
Uh,
fascinating because I always, as a big electronic music fan, I'm always looking for the right aesthetic, the right place, the right atmosphere, the right people, the right welcoming atmosphere for people to come in. And it's great to hear that you feel like people and you're seeing it. I'm glad it's out there because I always feel like it's not out there down here.
yeah, it's been
Like I have to DJ at like,
re-inspiring.
yeah, I have to DJ at like places where people are doing other stuff. Like the last DJ gig I had was I was put up my stuff and I played. music for like this vendor festival where it was sort of arts and crafts at least, where people were just shopping around and didn't expect to hear good music, and hopefully they enjoyed it. So at least there was that sort of surprise. But I mean, if people are actually going to something, I mean, that's kind of like a dream for me. Like I would love to play like a planetarium or stuff like that, or so those things, any kind of
Yeah.
any kind of thing that happens like that, I'm just really excited to hear about that because I think that's the future of DJing, especially for our type of music or people. It's not so much the rave, it's not so much the club drinking and stuff like that and getting drugs and stuff like that. It's more about nature and enjoying the music, and it just seems
Yeah.
really special.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
amazing.
and I think actually, touching back to the ambient side of things, these ecstatic dance shows, I feel like actually you can play down tempo and ambient stuff too, that and people follow you. Like you can build it up to some fast stuff and then suddenly play a slow song, and it doesn't clear the dance floor like it would in a bar or something where everyone's like, oh, time to go out and have a smoke or something, where people are like, they keep dancing and they roll with it. And so I bet you if you looked around in your community, you'd probably see someone doing ecstatic dance stuff, and you could probably get in there and play a much deeper set, or at least it has more peaks and valleys, and you can build a more interesting roller coaster ride
I've never
for
heard the
people.
name though.
Oh
Is
yeah, no,
actually
it's a
called ecstatic?
ecstatic dance. Five rhythms was a more of a structured one where they would sometimes have a dance facilitator who'd be talking as well, kind of guiding people through the dance and telling them to pay attention to different aspects of it or different
Wow.
stuff. And so five rhythms was a more structured thing, but within that umbrella. And I mean, I know here in the West and kind of up and down the coast in California and all these places, there's lots of these gatherings, and there are even now ecstatic dance festivals that are
Oh,
starting to happen. So I think that there's stuff around. I'm sure if you just looked around, and you'd probably find something, and you'd
yeah.
probably fit perfect in there. You have an incredible record collection, and I'm sure you would be really loved for your contributions. And if
That's
not, then you should just start your own one, and like ecstatic dance gathering, and you just more intentional, and you can do a deeper journey, and people come to listen to music and dance. There's no talking typically as one of the loose rules. Like, you want to talk, go outside, but when you're on the dance floor or when you're in the space, you're there to dance. So just be quiet and get on with it. And it's typically substance free, or at least alcohol free. I know a lot of them, people might have a little puff, before they show up there, and just to be, in a little bit more sparkly a mode, or maybe they did a little microdose or something. But, typically people are there to dance and to
that's
be
cool.
taken on a journey. And yeah, they're
That's cool
really
because
fun.
I'm a firm believer that like the BPMs and being constricted by BPMs has really killed a lot of dance music and
Yeah,
electronic music because
yeah.
it's so rigid and there's so much pressure on the DJ to stay in and mix perfectly that the music is very stale.
Mm,
And there's no funk in techno anymore, and there's no atmosphere in house, or there's no soulfulness in house. There's so much rigidness within, and it's all because of the pressure of a DJ. And I look at some of these DJs, and I'm just like, the pressure they must feel, and you wonder why they want to sync and just not DJ because they want to enjoy themselves. So there's part of me that doesn't blame them that they want to enjoy it and get a little bit in the crowd and stuff because if they were really mixing, they would their heads would be like this and they'd be concentrating.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
it's
it's
interesting. I found it fascinating. Occasionally meet people and DJs, and they will tell you, like, I'm 125. And that's basically, yeah, I play 125 BPM music. And that
yeah,
to me is quite fascinating, because I've always been more like, I'm just after songs. And after five or six or seven songs of a particular genre or style, I get bored. And I feel like maybe other people do. If I'm feeling it, like, other people might too. And so I'm trying to find something that's much more engaging. Maybe it starts slower, or maybe it starts fast because that's what the guy before was playing. And so you keep that vibe for a moment, but then you're like dipping down or slowing or, speeding it up and then breaking it in half into bass music or halftime or trap and then speeding it up and moving around. And that to me is a much more interesting thing, especially when you get a longer set. Sometimes when you get 1 hour and 90-minute sets, you're sort of stuck also trying to play all your hits or your favorite songs, and you've got this window and you're like trying to share as much of the cool stuff that you've found. But when you get 3-hour sets, 4-hour sets, 5-hour sets, suddenly then there's much more ability to take people on a journey and then set up a style. It's like, okay, I've got these 3 amazing psytrance songs, let's say. So what am I going to do before to tease that and create that hunger so that when I hit those, they're on the peak of a mountain. And then once I've hit that, where am I going? Like, how am I going to, keep that energy and momentum, but change the rhythm? And like, just watching dancers, you see how many different ways people dance and all the different rhythms that people connect to. That to me, it just feels obvious to
it really is
all over the place.
It really is a great art to DJ and connect with people through music. And so, what are you DJing on? What do you know? What's your normal DJ setup?
I've been using
ideally?
Tractor. Tractor is my software. I started off with the M Audio had one called Torque. And that was sort of when it first came out, it was kind of like the first DJ software and a controller. Because before that, it was CDs. Like I started on vinyl, and then from vinyl, I adopted CDs because we could make our own. You could burn your own songs on a CD and then bring those to the show. And so that was sort of like, you had your own songs on CD. So the CDJs became the thing. But then quickly I got fatigued with CDJs because of just like how I was bringing 4 books of CDs and I'd have them all organized, and you're spending all this time in pages and stuff looking for songs. And then when the computer thing came along, it sort of seemed more interesting that you could have it all there in one machine and with a controller. And so I sort of jumped onto that. And when the Torque thing, the M Audio one, it crashed all the time and it was buggy as. And then I switched to Tractor because at the time it was Tractor and Serato, but Serato was hardware locked. So if your controller thing wasn't plugged into your computer, the program wouldn't run. The copy protection was built into the thing or something. And to me, that was a deal breaker, because if I was on an airplane or going somewhere, I wanted to open my laptop, run the program and listen to songs and maybe reorganize a playlist or, change maybe in my comments, add more description to what this song was, because it changed going from CDs where you're like, oh, the Clown CD, track 4, and a little masking tape with a thing. And now you're like, oh, what was the name of that song? I need to know the name of the artist or the name of the song, or I can't find it.
Yeah, and it became worse when you're like, well, I'll just put 18 songs on one CD, and then you're like, which song was it? Like,
Yeah, and so I sort of got into it in the computer, and then like Tractor because you didn't have to have your hardware plugged in, and then I just stayed with it because it was pretty rock solid. It never usually crashed. And then for a while I had the little Z1 and the X1 when I was like I was doing lots of international, going to Australia and New Zealand and Japan and, Europe and stuff, playing shows. These were like little bus powered, tiny little controllers. You could fit it all in a little backpack. And so that became, and you would arrive at a gig, and because everybody had controllers, there was starting to be less and less space on the table to set up. And so these 2 little controllers were great. And it was all bus powered, so I didn't need other adapters to plug into all these foreign countries with their weird stuff. And the Mac, you would just change the end of the plug and the adapter would work. And so that became the journey for ages. And then just like a year ago, having done a show, and I noticed the difference in sound from a CDJ, and then I would mix into one of my songs from the laptop, and it was like, a third of the volume. And I realized, oh, these little RCA converters on this thing are not, they're like, older technology. And I just upgraded to a Tractor S4 controller, and now the sound is like back to really being
Are those
full.
XLR then, or?
Yeah, and it's XLR outputs as well. Because I also notice a lot of the shows I was doing around here now, I'm bringing speakers and a sub, and I'm setting up in a community hall myself, and I'm the only person. So it's literally my machine plugged into the sound system, and these ecstatic dance shows are often smaller. And it just sort of became obvious that I needed to get a better controller and one that I could plug a microphone, and so I could say some words and stuff. And so I upgraded to this thing, and I've been really happy with it. Sounds great.
That's
Like
good.
the
Yeah, I hope
converters
they.
in it are really good, and it's still rock solid. And yeah,
I
like
hope
it.
the future of. I hope the mixers get more to combine, because the analog and the digital, as far as like the connectivity with either, because it seems like they've done a good job with what you want to play, but not necessarily a great job of what you want to play to.
Yeah,
As far as your outputs and stuff like that. Sometimes there's XLR and RCA or a quarter inch, but it's there's only
and
only
I
so
don't.
many options.
Yeah, and I don't feel comfortable enough myself with showing up with the little USB sticks. As much as I'm slightly jealous, that you can
Yeah.
just rock up with a couple little things in your hand. And I've seen more people have troubles and, oh, the wrong version of this, or it's not reading their USB stick and this didn't work and that then you're beat. Whereas like I know that my system works, it worked yesterday, it's gonna work tomorrow, and it's like I have all my own stuff and I know it, and so I feel a confidence in at least knowing the same system and not being at the mercy of stuff at a venue. As much as I am slightly jealous of it too, but having all your music on like a little USB stick is kind of scary to me.
Yeah.
And I have a massive library of music in my collection from like basically all the music that I've ever collected and bought. I still have. My music library is close to 700 gigs now of full bandwidth
Just on a
files.
terabyte like drive,
Yeah,
or
on a terabyte SSD. I'm still on my 2011 17-inch MacBook Pro, ripped out the CD drive and put in a second hard drive. So my music library's there and it works. And I don't prepare sets in the sense of like, oh, it's this song and then it's going to be this song and then it's that. I've got lots of different playlists, but I play so many different types of shows that I never know what the vibe is going to be like until I'm actually there. And so to plan before, every time I've planned before, I arrived and observed, oh, this doesn't fit. Temperature was often one. I remember one year, a decade ago or so, prepping a set for Shambhala, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have this song, and then I'm going to play the second half of this chunk into this piece and into that one. And I spent all this time mapping something out. And then I arrived at the show, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's way hotter than I thought. I oftentimes would be planning my, work on the set in the evening, and it's kind of cooled down and you're like doing this stuff. And then I arrive and I'm playing 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it's 34 degrees. And you're like, oh, this music is way too fast for how hot it is. And that's not going to work. And having to abandon the plan. And then another time I did it, and it was pouring rain and cold, and I had all this hot, sunny afternoon dub, and it was clear none of that music was going to work. And it was, drum and bass, and just like kind of, how do we get these people stomping and jumping around in this pouring rain? Well, obviously, you got to throw some logs on the fire. And sort of those were my two kind of big lessons in my face of like, you can't prepare the set. You have to show up and figure it out in the moment. And sort of I wouldn't say claim to fame, but just my thing is like, it's all an improv in the moment. You
it
have three
has
or
to
four
be.
different songs, and then it's just about reading the crowd and even like playing that song and going, oh, okay, they don't like that trap stuff. And ooh, they like the 4/4 house beat or whatever. And so whatever it is that you're trying to put the worms on the hook to get the dance floor going, or I've often analogied it now, the dance floor is like a Rubik's Cube. And when you arrive, you start trying to solve the puzzle. What music is going to unlock these people and get them onto the wave? And once you get everybody there, then okay, maybe you can take them off into this idea that you had or that style. But you have to find the crowd first. And that you can only do that when you're there in front of them and you pay attention to maybe what the DJ before has been doing and maybe the vibe of the stage, but ultimately it's in the moment. So you can make playlists and you can be organized so that you're like, okay, now would be a good time for like some dubstep or something. And you're like, okay, well, here's a playlist of all my favorite curated dubstep songs. And I could maybe navigate through there. And then you get to a point you're like, okay, that's no longer working. All right, it's time for this style. And then I could go to a playlist that maybe I've collected all my favorite of that. And so that's more what I do. Or I'll make the crate kind of for that show. You know, if I had a 2-hour set, I might pile 5 hours of music in a place. And then I'll, in the moment, try and navigate through that and find what I think feels good. And you never know until you start, because then it's sort of always built off the last song of like where it's going or how people respond. And then you're paying attention to, you know, all those little signs from the crowd.
Yeah, I know. I mean, some of the worst mixes I've ever done is when I felt like, oh, these two records go well together, and then I was like, and then in the moment, you know, it's just you can't. It's better to do it spontaneous. I mean, that's
And
the way
then
it should
discovering
be.
cool blends of stuff when you drop a song in on another and you're like, oh man, this is amazing. And
I
I
mean,
think that excitement in the moment
yeah.
is also what the crowd feels, that when you're like being excited also by what you're discovering that you're doing, that excitement is a part, I think, as well of it.
Yeah, the pre-planning of sets has always been a pain point for me because I just like you said, how do you know what the crowd's going to read? You know,
Yep. But, you know, when you're up and coming too, it's also a part of the learning. It's the sort of training wheels of it. You sit at home and you maybe pile all your favorite songs and you find ones that mix together. And I've definitely heard sets from people that have kind of listed it all out that are great. So, you know, it still comes down to songs and song
yeah,
selection. Like, are you choosing great songs or not? And
yeah. It's
if
just
you're
sometimes
choosing
you,
great songs that you love, like that's more than 50% of the battle, I
yeah.
think.
Sometimes I would go to a place and this is the opening DJ over here, and he's pulling out all his best tracks as if the floor was filled and there's nobody on the dance floor, and you're
Yeah, you got
playing.
to read the room for sure.
You know,
And
it's kind of that experience to be adaptable, but you have to like a lot of music and be
yes,
open to it and be
yeah.
interested in it because I mean playing a pre-recorded set or a pre-lined up set is so boring for me. Like I
Oh,
got to
for
be
sure. And
engaged. You know what I mean? Like
I think that fans feel that too. I remember seeing an electronic producer, one of my favorite, absolutely brilliant music that he's done, like next level stuff. And I would see him at a show just, you know, playing like he just looks bored. He doesn't even look like he wants to be there. He's making 10 grand for a set. You know, he's the biggest name and whatever. And he just looks bored out of his mind. And I see him 5 times and it's the same set. Maybe he changed that song with this song. And, you know, to me, if you're not excited, how you expect anybody else to be excited?
yeah, and are
Um,
you incorporating any of live music into these? Have you started doing that? Have you done that any of that yet, or just pretty much DJing?
Oh, they're very much separate. I DJ, and when
Okay.
I DJ now, I don't usually like DJing and having live musicians join me. I also have some live projects, and then when we play live, it's fully live, and I'm using Ableton, and I have all beats and stems, and we've got loopers, like with my Monkey Dragon project, which I have with this guy Buckman Co. And we got a brass section, and we're like live looping stuff and improvising. Like we have songs, but we've played them enough now that like we know the melody and we know the riff, but how we open it up and how we execute it is different every time, and that keeps it fresh. Because each one, it's more like a raga now, where it's like you're improvising on that song. And so, you know, and oh, the brass guys are doing a different riff today, and like, oh, okay, so we can improvise, you know, around that. And so yeah, I definitely have a couple different live projects and I still do those. I've got a project with this woman that I've been working with for a couple decades now, Gemma Luna, and we started a new folk and dub project where it's kind of taking folk music and dub, and like we've been songwriting and like working. This is the video that I've been working on for the last couple weeks now for the first single that's going to get released, but I haven't uploaded it yet because I wanted to finish the video first and know that that's done. Then I'll upload the song, and then, you know, that'll come out hopefully maybe in August, I think, at the rate I'm going. That's video takes a lot longer than you think.
I wanted to pivot a little bit to
Sure.
you starting your label. It's one of my
Okay.
favorite CDs, by the way.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, that's been my most popular one, and in the recent years. And it's interesting. I think it's connected to flow state in a way. I look back through all my different albums, and there was always one song on the album that, you know, just kind of like wrote itself or just happened. And this album actually was like that. I had done little songs and just like this little thing and that. And then all of a sudden one day I was just like, yeah, I was working on the Basswalla CD, and that was more, you know, ethno, Indo, dubby, funky, whatever. And then I got to a point where I felt like I was on a plateau with it, and I needed to just take a break before I tried to finish it. And so I just pivoted and was like, oh, I think this week I'm going to make an ambient CD. And all of a sudden there were 2 or 3 songs that just like they happened in the time it took to literally play the thing. There's one song on there, Warm Hope, that doesn't even,
That's my favorite song on the
doesn't
CD.
even have a file. I literally jammed and just recorded like a stereo mix of me just playing this thing, and then it was just like, oh wow, that was kind of neat.
It's a beautiful track. It's my favorite
Yeah,
on the CD.
and it just sort of happened in, I don't know how ever many minutes it is, 7 minutes
Like,
long. It
Is
took
it a
8
short one,
minutes
isn't
to
it?
write.
It's the short one. It's like three and a half.
Okay, yeah.
3:54.
It
Yeah.
took 5 minutes to do. And it was sort
Wow.
of just those moments that happen sometimes when you're like not trying to do something, or you're out of the way of yourself in the process. And it just happened. And sort of like, I felt like interested to do an ambient album, but also like, you know, I've been getting body work and doing meditation and stuff. And so I reached out, I had 20 songs, and I reached out to 4 or 5 different massage practitioners and a healer lady who, you know, was doing Reiki and stuff. And I gave them 20 songs, and I said, pick your favorite 7 songs or 8 songs or whatever. And so I got these lists back from all these people, and it was sort of like, oh, wow, look, most people chose the same 8 or 9 songs. And so that became the kind of impetus for the choices of putting this together. And then also just considering, like, if I was getting body work done, like, what's the kind of envelope that I would like to have? And that kind of partially came out of compilation called Interior Horizons, and the whole idea was like, make a song call for getting body work done. And so I wrote a song, Sabadi, and that was the one that went on that. And it was sort of the same idea. I was like, oh, I'm going to make an album that's like for massage and stuff. And so selected all these different songs, and then, you know, kind of put it out almost as a afterthought. I was still focused on, you know, Basswalla, and then, you know, just put them both up, and, you know, it's kind of eclipsed the other in terms of streams. And I think also most people listen to chill out stuff. When you're listening to music at home, it's more on the down tempo side. I think some of my most streamed stuff is the ambient stuff on the streaming services, and not so much the banger dance ones. Whereas on Bandcamp, you know, I'll sell more of the dancey songs, and probably DJs and other people are buying them. And I don't tend to sell as much of the down tempo stuff on my Bandcamp. It started with all my stuff, and then like projects that I had done when I released the Dream Tree project. I had done this like classical Indian sitar dub project with a sitar player in Montreal, Uwe Neumann, and we were playing a lot around in like 99, 2000 and all of that. And so, yeah, it just became a moniker kind of for my own releases, and then that's expanded to now me starting to release other people's music that I really like. And sort of, you know, as we started with Andrew Ross Collins, got us hooked up with IOTA, and they were the Independent Online Distribution Alliance, and they were basically a little umbrella for little independent labels to kind of release music and get it up into Spotify and all those things. And then they got bought up by somebody who then got bought up by Orchard, who got bought up by Sony. And so we were just grandfathered in to this mechanism. And so that's how we've kind of ended up there. And I'm just kind of keep releasing stuff through there.
Nice, nice. And are you going to keep this next project you're working on with the Afro will be on that as well, right?
Yep, yep, that will. And then, yeah, this Dutch composer, Yogi, I'm going to be releasing his music through my label. And I've got another ambient record that I'm slowly putting on, the folk and dub project with Gemma. That will be, that's sort of the next releases because most of that music is done now. Just working on some videos because now we've also discovered you kind of have to make a video to release a song now. We're in the multimedia age, and it seems like most of the way fans are connecting with music and new discovery is through the video. And so putting it up on Instagram and all that. I don't actually have a TikTok, but probably I'll even create one of those just to, if someone hasn't already made a TikTok page in my name, I'll probably put something up there too. But it seems like most people are discovering music through videos. And now that we've got cameras and computers and stuff, it seems like a natural thing. And just from all my time doing film music and composing for film, I can see the value of having some visual part to the story as well. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do a video for years. I feel like
Yeah, that was
I feel like it's a missed opportunity because,
totally.
it's so visual. Like, and your music is so visual for me. It seemed
Yeah.
like a no-brainer. I hope to do more of that in the future because I feel
Oh,
like
you should.
it is the future.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on like AI music, physical music, distribution right now, Bandcamp. Like, where's your thought process and all how to give your fans the music? Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, as a small independent artist slash label, I mean, one of the challenges of physical products is the capital that it takes to, press 1,000 records or 1,000 CDs or whatever it is. You have to kind of tie up your capital, then you have to have a distributor, then you have to have, a marketing campaign and a stuff, or you could just upload it through one service and it's in all the streaming places. And so for Monkey Dragon, we did a limited edition 200 vinyls, and I sold them for a little bit more and I hand kind of autographed each one and wrote a little number on them. And, fans stepped up, and I think within, like a month, I had sold the first 100. But the energy it took to manage those and mail them off, and then the fact that like someone in England bought a vinyl for $50 and it cost $55 for shipping for one vinyl. So suddenly someone's paid $100, for a physical product. And like, it's incredible. And my, shout out to all my fans that did that. Like, it was incredible. But, it's not the economic model, really. Not everyone's buying $100 piece of music. So that's a challenge. And then it was sort of like, do people still listen to CDs? Is that still a thing? There are fans that actually want a physical, tangible thing, and they're not necessarily into vinyl or don't have that. And so I definitely have been getting requests, and I've been getting requests for some of my older releases. And luckily, I still have a couple boxes of this thing or that thing, on CD. And so I've been able to kind of hook people up. But where it used to be, maybe 3 or 4 orders a day for stuff, now it's like maybe 3 or 4 orders a year for like a physical thing. And so the impetus of tying up a grand in product, like, it hasn't necessarily served its purpose. I recognize that probably in marketing and better presentation, there might be more people. And I know now in the last few shows that I've done, people have been asking if I have stuff. And so, there are some considerations. And like with the artists that I'm producing, I'm definitely telling some of them that, like, pressing up 100 CDs isn't necessarily a bad thing, and that you'll probably sell them, especially for your fans that are going to come out at your listening party or at your release party. They want to go away with something, and to have a signature and to have artwork and other stuff, it is still a thing. And I think that is what I lament about this move to digital and streaming was the loss of the physical thing and the loss of the music collection.
Mm.
Because people don't have music collections. They've got playlists and you can listen to anything. And that's the plus side of streaming, is that you have access to the entire recorded history of humanity. And you want to listen to some Afrobeat, you could type that in and find something right away, where we used to have to go down to a record store and maybe they didn't have any, or maybe they only had this, or, it was a much more limited access. Maybe it made what you got more special. But I think that for fans, it's never been a better time for being able to listen to anything you want. So that's the positive of it. The negative of it is we've lost the physical thing. We've lost the tangible thing. You would go to your friend's house and you look, or like I'm looking at your thing and you're like, oh, what's that CD in the corner there? Like, that looks interesting. And you're like, oh, here, check it out. Or you should borrow it. And just the fact that it was physical let people share music in a different way. And like, I think artists got discovered more, maybe. I mean, the algorithms are great, and like we discover lots of cool music there. Storage was basically the fundamental issue when it started being digital and you were buying songs, and now you got a hard drive full of songs, and oh, now I ran out of space. Or the phone became the place where we listen to music, and suddenly you're like, well, your phone's always full with pictures and everything else, and it started to become an issue with storage. So I think that's where the streaming thing, it kind of solved that problem in a way.
Yeah,
but it also killed the collection.
Well, I always thought from a music appreciation, you see people with $20 headsets on badly encoded files. Just the whole idea was like, I mean, just imagine what people lost in money for buying MP3s or buying ringtones. You know what I mean? Like, we're multi hundreds and hundreds of $1 million people spent, and they don't even have these songs anymore. So it's also the ownership.
Yeah.
And that comes with the non-ownership. I like that song. It's in this limbo period. Eventually, maybe you delete it, or maybe they like it, but they don't go and then buy the record.
Yeah.
So it's like,
maybe. I mean,
sometimes
yeah. Or you discover an artist and maybe you got their MP3s and now you go to their show when they're in your neighborhood. So it's a slippery one, but I do still lament the loss of the music collection.
Yeah.
Which was, you collected and kept copies of the music that you were passionate about and that you loved. And in the same way that you collect books that you really connect around, and you feel you might go to the library and sign out 10 books, but there's one that you're like, oh, I want to have this in my collection. Yeah. And so I think that was the biggest thing that the streaming thing initially kind of killed, was the music collection. And it's really only the most diehard music fans and people who love music that are still kind of pursue the collection and still want. And maybe it's our older generation too, that we grew up with that. Like, we all remember our first vinyl or the first album that we bought, and that whole process. Yeah. I look at my kids, they don't have music collections. They listen to stuff. I mean, my son, he's constantly discovering amazing stuff. And we have listening sessions where he comes in with he'll make a playlist of all the cool things that he's discovered. And we sit down in the studio and he shows me all this music and I get to listen to these things. So we have, time that we connect around listening to music and discovering the things that he likes. My daughter listens to music. I hear her when she pulls up in her car and she's got the beats going and stuff, but there's no collection and it's just playlists, and it's just a different relationship to it. Yeah, it's strange, but it is right. What it is.
Yeah. You're right. It is a relationship altering, changing, because like when I think of also physical music, like there's such an attachment to it, but it's the digital is maybe not so much, but like you're saying, the learning part is advanced so much. But then sometimes, if I bought a CD and I may not like it, and then I go back 5 years later and play it, and I start to appreciate, maybe it was too ahead of the time for me. Maybe I didn't have the understanding to really appreciate it. And so there's,
totally.
when you purchase something, spend your hard-earned money on something and I'm sure I'm preaching to the crowd, but you have a different attachment to it, and you almost feel like you want to give it its attention because you spent money on it. You
Yeah,
take the
maybe
time to
there's perhaps that.
like a
I
little bit.
think also, like, I remember from vinyl, um, you kind of, when you listen to vinyl, you're kind of more engaged. You have to listen to, you put it on, in 20 minutes or whatever, you're going to have to get up and take the, stylus off the record when it finishes. So you're kind of more connected there. And then you would get the artwork and you'd open it up and there'd be pictures and there'd be words. And that was another part of the listening experience. And I think
Yeah.
now it's just like a million songs, or it's on shuffle, and then the algorithm is telling you what's next, and you're just kind of fed stuff. And then there are people that are happy. I think the same people that maybe listen to pop music on the radio, they don't care what it is, they just listen to it. It's background stuff versus like really intentionally listening to stuff. And I think that the streaming, it kind of also can be that. It just becomes a background thing, and it's just whatever the algorithm recommends next.
Yeah, I think if you're really into music, what I'm finding with a lot of the younger generation that are getting into vinyl and purchasing, there's a part of them out there that they do kind of look at the older generation was like they don't own any of their music. They got, I wouldn't say bamboozled, but they spend a lot of money on stuff that they can't resell. So when you do buy physical copies, at least there's a market for it. You spent your money, you could recoup that, maybe even get more for it. It's limited edition. You sold 100 copies,
Yeah,
200 copies.
yeah, yeah.
So there is the second hand mark. Hand market is very interesting. What are your thoughts on AI?
Um, I have a range of thoughts. I think that uh, as all new technologies, and as someone who's an electronic musician, built my career using technology. We got computers that were not necessarily designed for music, and we managed to make music with them. We got programs, and people wrote programs to turn these boxes of ones and zeros into things that would make music. And so we're always looking for the next interesting thing, and samplers came along, and suddenly you could record sounds that you heard in and then play them and then mess around with them. And so there was really cool technology that allowed us to do things that we couldn't do before. With AI in music, I mean, you could split that up into machine learning and some of like what algorithms and things are there. Like now we have software plugins where there's software code that emulates a keyboard and like maybe does other things. And there's fascinating stuff. I think that when people use what's now called AI to prompt and to create a song and just have a finished result, to me that's empty. And albeit you might create something or prompt some interesting combinations of things, my own experience has been ultimately a lot of that stuff has felt really empty and soulless and kind of not that engaging. Like they say, it's the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. But
Well, that's true.
for me, part of music and the creation of music was also it's a journey, not a destination. And writing a song is a journey of making a drum sound or getting a sound or creating a sound that then sparks inspiration. And really cool music is a journey of inspiration of an artist and their experience with their instruments. And I think I did a rant about this a while ago. The blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to learn to play an instrument and to coax it into making sound. And you could say, oh, a synthesizer, it takes away that versus someone who played the piano and all that. It's still a journey, and it takes sometimes even more energy and effort to get these cold, sterile synthesizers to make a sound that's engaging or interesting. That it's the journey of your inspiration. It's the journey of your soul expressing something, and like the feedback loop that comes from hearing something and then adding something else and having that shift your perception of what it is. And maybe only after you combine those two things do you suddenly have the idea for this other part, which actually maybe those first two sounds don't even end up in your finished song, and it's this thing that becomes the song. And so that journey is, to me, what makes the creative process engaging and interesting, and the results of what we do interesting. And prompting feels like the creator gets robbed of that experience. And like, now I can make 10,000 songs in the same time it took someone else to make one song. And the fact, I think, also that most of these AI music systems were trained, and often illegally, on all of our human music and creation, that what would an AI sound like if it didn't train on human music and it just went about its business and made music based on its own processes of discovering what that was, if it didn't get to listen to anything human beings did? Then I might be more interested in what an AI system is creating as sound journeys if it never listened to human music. But it did. And it stole, it plagiarized, it illegally trained on human data sets. Some maybe it did, but I mean, I follow a bunch of court cases right now, and these AI companies are not faring well with their illegal use and, trying to use fair use as an excuse for, scraping the internet and then spitting out all this stuff and being able to, barf out a fusion of this thing and that thing because it absorbed all of those things. And so some people have said, oh, well, that's no different than learning how to play an instrument. The AI is training on data and you trained on other people's music to learn music. I don't think that necessarily holds up, because if our brains perfectly, and there are people that, can do this, that have like photographic memory, they can hear or see something and then it's etched permanently in their brain, and they can go back molecule by molecule and represent you that. And so there are those people, and often those people that do music, they're even more amazing because they've got this kind of photographic memory. But it's not the same as byte by byte, frequency by frequency, copying something that a human created, right? It's different than how when we learn music, and then we have to sit down and we have to train our brain to play scales. And, I know that the OpenAI guy tried to make the analogy that the energy it took to train an AI system versus the amount of energy and food and stuff that a human had to do to get to the same level. And I think that's a weird kind of equivalency to try and make. And I think that the way the human soul responds to vibration and the way musical instruments excite the air, even more so in acoustic instruments, where it is an actual physical vibration. A string is vibrating and it's vibrating the molecules, and then you're perceiving that vibration, especially if you're sitting in front of an acoustic instrument, versus it running through speakers and a PA. It's a real vibration, a flute or a guitar, and the human voice being the pinnacle, I think, of the musical expression of a human. Like, we are literally vibrating ourselves and our throats to make this vibration that then you, the listener, hear. And then why, when you hear that singer or this singer, you resonate, like you hear, singer A, and you're like, doesn't do anything. And you hear this other singer and you're just like, oh, it speaks to you and it touches you and its sound penetrates you in a way that's transcendent. And that's a very personal thing. And I think that that's probably my least favorite part of this AI generated music, is the voice. That seems to me the part that reveals the fakeness of it. And it's sort of the equivalency of, like, you eat something sugar and then you eat something that's the fake chemical sugar, and it leaves this weird aftertaste. And yeah, it's kind of sweet, but it's, and I think that to me is what AI music kind of is now. not to say that you can't use AI in your creative process, but when the AI is your creative process, and you're basically saying, well, give me a dubstep song like this and with that, and it barfs out a bunch of things, and now you pat yourself on the back and call yourself a musician. Give me a break. You're not a musician. Musicians learned instruments and trained their ear, and that stuff comes through devotion and dedication and 10,000 hours, let's say, to master something is sort of at that level of journey. And so, it's sad that so many people think it's awesome. Those are also possibly the same people that like the Muzak pop music, where every single pop song sounds like every other pop song, and bleh. It's also why I don't resonate to any of that stuff, and I don't listen to that. It doesn't move me. And so now we can move to the other part of it, the psychological experience. And I guess if you hear something and it moves you, and you have an experience that makes you feel emotions and connects you to something deeper than yourself, well, who am I to judge you and your own experience with that? And if that's some AI generated thing, well, I guess that's, your experience with that will validate that. I know for myself so far, some different AI generated music that I've heard hasn't really moved me. And
yeah, the only two applications that I think is a little bit, writing songs for advertising, for example, or the people that did that, wrote jingles.
Yep.
But that job is
even
pretty
then,
much
and
gone.
I think then as a working musician,
Yes, evolved.
these systems are taking work away from real human beings who are trying to earn a living or trying to do a craft, invested all their time and energy and work into stuff. And yeah, okay, it's jingles and it's selling products, but some of the catchiest jingles, that's like craftsmanship of even like those musicians that crafted those things. Like there's a skill set and a work, and the fact that you can just type that in and pay your $10 a month, and now you've got this stuff that now that's good enough, and that's taking work away from humans. And once again, trained on the work of humans. Like, show me an AI system that didn't train on any work of any humans and it's outputting stuff. Great. Knock yourself out. But ultimately, it's all on the backs. It's the theft of intellectual property of all the people who created stuff. And it's stolen from them, and none of them got credited. None of them got any money for this. And so now you can prompt something. And that's my beef now with Spotify and all these other things. So Spotify, it's supposed to be like maybe 60 to 70,000 songs a day are AI generated, are flooding the Spotify platform. Spotify works on a music share, a credit. So one stream gets you a credit. The money that they collect in their quarter divided against the credits equals how much your stream is. It's not a fixed rate. So now 60,000 new AI generated songs go into that pool. Now you're diluting that pool from the real humans who created music and are trying to scratch a living through these already pathetic streaming rates. And now you're diluting it with all this garbage. And so that's another beef where I have, like, you're even now stealing even more money away from the actual legitimate humans who are creating music and putting their blood, sweat, and tears into their craft. You're now taking away from them too on a double level. And so, yeah, it really...
Yeah,
it makes me sad because I feel, and that's where I was joking with my Titanic records. I feel like we're recording original human created music at the end of recorded history, where pretty soon, because of the sheer volume of it, no one's going to even care anymore. It's just going to be like,
Yeah, see, I
yeah.
see, like there's a lot of songs out there that aren't properly published or properly copyrighted, right? Who gets those streams, right? Goes back to whatever the company is in the. So imagine how Spotify is promoting or wanting AI music to
Well,
be
they own a
made
couple
because
companies that generate that stuff, and then they pay themselves. They were already doing it
yeah,
a decade ago. They created a company in Sweden who would pay $100 a song to buy all the rights and then they would just upload all that stuff, and then they would pay their own company to stream, and then they would put that music that they own all their rights to on their playlists, and then they would push those playlists, so then they were paying themselves. So the theft is already been happening, and like to Daniel Ek and all his minions of stuff, like they have basically cheapened music and stolen from all of us. And it's unfortunate, but that's where the market is, and that's where the fans are. And so when you create music, would you stand in an empty parking lot, or would you go in the parking lot where all the people are buying the stuff? And so that's the other sort of paradox of this thing. I feel like it's, I don't promote my music on Spotify because it feels like I'm taking my rapist out for dinner. And why would I help you rape me more? But at the same hand, there's 100,000 people that love my music and actively listen to it. They're my fans. Why would I feel bad for my fans loving my music and listening to it? Not all of them want to buy it on Bandcamp, and that's fine. And the ones that do. But, the AI music, I think it's cheapening and lessening initially the specialness maybe. But I think in the longer term, so much of that stuff's going to be crap. And I think there's going to be a renaissance in the same way that people wanted vinyl because they wanted a physical, tangible thing. I think that there are going to be fans who want to hear music that human beings created. And I think that, well, we already know that Spotify is planning to introduce a new tier. You're going to pay $30 a month, and then you can get only human curated music. And then all the other stuff will just it'll become the Muzak of whatever. It'll be the elevator music of it all, and it's all computer generated, blah blah blah. You already hear it now in the malls and in the shopping things because they don't have to pay any royalties on that stuff because no one owns any of the copyrights. But I think that also is further undermining the infrastructure that was hard won and put in place by all our forefathers and sisters and mothers of creating art and then trying to get paid for it. And, copyrights and royalties and the different mechanisms like, ASCAP and BMI and SOCAN. So your stuff gets played, there are pennies that come back to you, and all those little trickles help us survive. And so I think AI is undermining that. It's kind of sad, but I think, it's going to there'll be another renaissance in human music. I know, funnily enough, and I just watched a video recently of an LA studio producer saying they're actually getting more work now than ever. People generate these songs and then they want to create it for real with real musicians and real things. And so they maybe used it as a songwriting thing and they crafted their idea, but now they're actually hiring real people to play the stuff because they don't like the generic result. And I just got hired by a guy. He made a house music song in AI, and then he came to me and I videotaped myself basically creating the song for real and doing it as a music lesson, teaching him how to use Ableton. Here's the song you prompted. Here's my lesson of how to make that thing for real using a drums and kicks and bass, and how do you train your ear to break down all the different parts of it. And I ended up making like $1,000 just to teach this guy how to write a song based on a song that he prompted in AI. So, who knows? Maybe it'll actually bring us real musicians even more work as the humans want something real after they feel the fake sugar taste of it.
Yeah, I'm seeing
it's the journey.
Yeah,
Music is a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot of because I'm obviously I'm deep into the vinyl community, and I'm seeing a lot of people get more interested in component stereos also, and that
Oh yeah.
feeds the physical desire, the desire to have physical. So they go in hand to hand. So I actually just came back yesterday from I was at a record store that's about to be opening up. It's about 3 miles down the street, and they offer secondhand component stereos and stuff like that. And they wanted to hire me for selling their component stereos and also their record store. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, but I'm seeing more people, and you could say, vinyl is increasing every year. CDs have been increasing. Cassette culture is never, it hasn't been this strong in a very long time,
Interesting.
especially with ambient and like heavy metal and types of metal, like the cassette community with those people that are interested in that music is really strong. So it's interesting you're seeing the trends, but I do think there's some people out there that do want to own something, and they feel slighted by paying for something that they're not getting anything out of physically.
Mm,
So I do see a big push in people wanting to support their artist, and the more avenues there are for supporting your artist and being in touch with those people, even
yep,
if it's Patreon or
yep,
things like that, like it does boost the contact, and you do want to support the people that you do get something
yep,
from, you do get
yep.
entertainment from.
Yeah,
So
and that could be the, the golden era of that, as sometimes you have to lose something in order to recognize, oh, actually that was something that you took for granted, and then you lose it,
yeah,
and then you're like, oh no, that actually was the special part of it. And
yeah,
so who knows, maybe there'll be another renaissance in that. And I think also fans are recognizing that streaming really hurt artists, and it took
yeah,
a lot of money away from them, and a lot of artists relied on that. And so when fans really do love something, I think they are finding, ways to support the people that they truly love, and they recognize that there is a direct connect to that. And maybe now also with all our technology is that they can join a Discord server, or they can directly chat. You can instant message and actually communicate with the artist, which, back in the early 90s, you didn't
yeah.
necessarily have that ability to actually chat to that artist that you loved. And now you could. And so, I think we're always finding new ways to connect, and I think that is one of the inherent parts of humans, especially with music, is like we want to connect. We want to connect around music. We want to connect with people who create that music. That's why we go to the shows. I think that, live music is probably going to continue to grow in popularity too, because it's real, and there are real people in a real exchange, and people coming out together, sort of like coming around the campfire. Like, you
Yeah.
have to show
Yeah,
up
unless you're
in person.
Kraftwerk, nobody's going to pay to see a robot.
Yeah, well, yeah, they so. And I mean, gosh, there are some folks in Japan. I mean, there's some robots doing shows, and they're like AI generated characters. My son was showing me an artist who's got tens of millions of streams, and it's an AI generated voice that, then a robot goes and on the stage, and they sold out a stadium, and like that's a thing too. And I guess it comes back to, like, if you're feeling connected around that, and that's what floats your boat,
There
more
is
the
some
power to
people
you.
out there that just want to see how far technology could go.
Yeah, and like I
You
don't want to
know,
thwart that either. Like, I built my career using bits of technology. I'm not just sitting in a corner playing an acoustic guitar,
yeah,
lamenting on the for the good old days.
yeah,
But I think that AI stuff, if you're using it to aid your creative process, it could be a tool. There's definitely times when I thought, oh man, I just spent, 8 hours editing the breaths out of a vocal. That'd be neat if a little robot could come along and do that, and it free me up to do some other stuff. But to have it actually write the song and do all the parts and do the finished thing, like, then I'm robbed of my joy of the creative process. The
yeah,
being the Christopher Columbus on your new landscape that you just created. And so, yeah, the people that want to create with AI will, and if they want to call themselves creators, I guess they can live in that illusion that they're creating the stuff, but uh,
mm,
they're just fancy prompt engineers, and so whatever.
yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I wanted to
It,
transition. We got to really appreciate your time. I don't want to take any too much more of your time, but I did want to get your thoughts on, or tell us about your vlogs. I've been seeing your vlogs. Kind
oh
of
yeah.
give me the thoughts behind that, doing starting that, and
Well,
what's your goals for this?
I think there's a few. One was, I wanted to make some videos, and I wanted to start commenting on things and sharing things in a way. And years had gone by where I kept thinking about it, and I was like, how do I break the lack of momentum? How do I start this process? and start just getting comfortable doing it. And so that was part of the idea. The other was years and years ago, I got a book that was basically Brian Eno's diary. And for a year, he just wrote every day what he was doing music in his daily thing. And so for me, I thought that might be interesting too, to just do a little daily capture of like what I'm working on and what I'm doing, because a lot of people like wouldn't necessarily know like, oh, I work on music every day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm in my studio doing stuff, whether it's working on a video or producing a thing or doing. And so I thought it might be neat to like make a little record of that. And then that broke the momentum, or created momentum, of making videos every day. And so now it's easier to now start making a video. Like I'm doing one on AI data centers right now. And I started in one about water and watersheds and water security as they're logging a watershed behind us. And now I realize that they're actually kind of connected, and that the video I'm doing about water and like our human and life's basic right to water, and the United Nations declared it a basic human right, and Canada recognized it, but then you look at the laws and it's like not quite implemented. Or yes, our access to water is a basic right, but if you're Indigenous, somehow it's not. And then if it is a basic right, how come the water protections only go up to the source, but they don't actually protect the source of the water? So if I'm getting my water from the stream here, someone can go and screw up the source at the top and I might lose my water, but I thought I had a basic right to access water. And now someone else is disconnected from that. So that, and now looking at AI systems and like, so do humans have the right to water? What happens if an AI data center goes in and now they're taking all that water and then they're polluting that water? And now I just read an article by Sierra Club yesterday that there's PFAS in water. And so we're polluting all this water. And so where do our rights around water come? And now I see that they're kind of connected, even though I'm working on these two different videos. But that also has come from me doing vlogs and just starting to daily kind of communicate and share my thoughts. And like, maybe no one cares, maybe people do. I'm getting messages from people all around the world saying that they're enjoying these little daily clips of my life. And that sort of reminded me of like, oh wow, there's like, our reach is global now, as human beings, or maybe even as artists. Like, I got messages from people in Australia and Japan and Germany. And so that's been kind of interesting. And now I realize I'm sharing, and maybe even as a legacy for my kids. Now there'll be a bunch of, videos of their dad rambling about different things. And maybe that'll be interesting in a decade or two. So yeah, that's been the start of it. And, just sharing other thoughts and perspectives. I just went on Facebook while I was waiting for you, and this post came up, and I just want to share it because it's kind of, this is a musician, a lady that's done healing work and, healing music and stuff. So this is 2026. You hear a trending audio on Instagram. I like the lyrics and the groove. I check out their Spotify, YouTube, and website, and all I see is AI generated images and AI generated videos with AI women. Is this a real band? I search and search some more and finally get an answer to my DMs on Insta. She's not a singer or a musician, but she writes the lyrics. Yeah, right, ChatGPT does. And then AI does the rest. And of course, she has 60,000 followers on a 6-month-old account. Probably a dude or an employee of Spotify tasked with creating popular algorithmic music to make YouTube ad revenue. I guess this is the way of the world now. Forget actually training in music, art, writing, etc. Forget putting in years and years of live gigs, applying for grants, funding your own recordings, slogging. Forget the humanity or artistry. Just let the robots do it. And so my comment there, and someone had shared, Diplo's infamous quote now where he was praising the AI vocals in his music. It's like, well, maybe we just need to get the AI to listen to this stuff too for us, because we don't clearly need to be a part of the equation at all. And so I just thought that was interesting, as it's a very strange time.
Yeah,
But
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but that's where we're
Oh,
at.
I ran across a digital label. I won't say the name. They had a compilation that was roughly about 55 tracks. And me as a label owner, somebody who it ties pretty close to smaller and mid-sized labels. I was like, what's the chances that somebody has the communication bandwidth to talk to 55 different producers to collect this compilation when they just put out one about 2 months ago? They have that many. So you
Right.
do have some labels out there that are making, their AI labels.
Well,
So
yeah, that's
they,
the thing. And I
yeah.
searched my name the other day. Someone was asking me for something. So I just typed my name in Google, and Adham Shaikh with a weird little symbol at the end came up with a Bandcamp page. And someone had created an Adham Shaikh Bandcamp page, changed one of the letters in my last name, and then had 6 of my songs that sounds like they ran through an AI generator and it respat out a kind of weird MP3 version, same song titles, all my songs. And so I wrote to Bandcamp. It was instantly taken down. I found it on YouTube. I found it in a bunch of places. And so that's the other side now. People are just ripping off artists, generating, feeding that into AI, having it spit out their own version of it, and then they're putting that up online.
Well, the sad thing too is the people
It's
that want
strange.
to, get money through doing a TikTok video, so they need music to do it, and so they're like, "Well, I just need a song for it," and when it could be somebody's getting paid for that, so it's a snowball effect for sure.
Yeah, it's a strange time, and
Yeah,
I think that somehow it makes me even more committed to the journey and the creative process, and just my own personal joy in creating music and working with other human beings who want to create music, and like helping them also. And I
yeah.
think at the end of the day, we're going to see people want that stuff, and so I keep creating human curated music, and maybe that's the new marketing angle, that this music was created with real human beings, and like it'll go the way of organic, where you get organic food. Oh, that's like grown without chemicals and crazy pesticides, and is actually maybe closer to what food's supposed to be than all this weird, you know stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a strange time.
Yeah. Just so we can end on something positive.
Yes.
Then I want to end on AI. So you mentioned earlier about you teaching people.
Yes.
So give me kind of a topic and just a
Well,
quick.
I mean, 3 of my students right now, it's Ableton that they
Okay.
seem very interested in learning. And then one of my students is Logic, which is kind of been my primary platform for creating, and all the film music and stuff. I tend to go to Logic first, although I still use Logic. And I saved all my Rewire instances. And so I'm in Logic version 10 where Rewire still works. So I run Logic and then I run Ableton, and they all work as one big unified program, because I think there are still, there are things that Ableton does that Logic doesn't do, and vice versa. And so to get the best of both worlds, I sometimes use both. But everybody's got their own processes, and I think Ableton is really great, especially as you start thinking about live performance. Ableton has lots of different ways that it can be used, and so that seems to fit a lot of people, and it's fairly easy to use, and there's lots of great videos and tutorials and things. But with one of my students, they signed up for a course, but the course is like, I mean, it starts off simple and gets advanced, but it's even too much. And so now I'm helping them understand their course and just kind of giving them pointers and, kind of instructing them on their instruction sets. And it's just cool to see people still wanting to learn, stuff and learn how to be creative on their own. And so, yeah, it's been really fun to teach these people. And then one of the people is just a production and discipline and workflow and sort of process and, sound design, and like kind of teaching them how to listen, as I realize there's so much that I sort of take for granted because it's just built up on the backs of the previous information, to realize, oh, someone might not necessarily be able to listen to a song and make their ear just go in and listen to just the kick drum or just the hi-hat or whatever. And so then you're telling them to, like, yeah, listen to the swing and the hi-hat, and they're like, mm. And so it's even like now learning how to listen. And that's been one of my classes this week, was throwing a song like listening to a song and then throwing it in one of the stem separators and breaking it out into these separate parts, which is kind of an interesting, it's not AI, but it's machine learning, and it's sort of magic to me. The fact you can take a song and pull it apart to drums and vocals and other elements, but it's allowing then for an easier focus on, okay, now you can just listen to the drums, hear the rhythm, hear the thing, like what's a groove, what's quantizing, and like being able to break down that stuff and just sort of teach people how to listen has been a really fun part of this. And just sort of, it almost, by showing someone who doesn't know, you also realize the things that you know, because I don't know what I know until someone asks me a question, and then suddenly that information is there. And so that's been a really fun journey for me as well, to kind of discover what people don't know so that I can like be the missing piece to kind of fill that in.
Yeah, that's cool. I talk a lot about selective hearing.
Mm,
And on my videos, as far as like pointing out things that I think are really cool about different tracks, and
yeah.
and sometimes you can really, you know, not pay attention to something that's really annoying because there's certain songs that really do a really good job of that, and I don't know if that's just been years of listening to abstract or experimental music and things like that, but there's times where I can totally tune out something that would be sort of annoying to somebody else
Right. Right.
and enjoy the other parts, but that part's really not even annoying to me either. But
Interesting.
there is that kind of like learning to focus on certain things and let alone be able to kind of describe them. That's even the harder thing sometimes, is describing like sounds and things like that. But
Yeah.
it's
And then
it's
you just
interesting.
realize how people listen, and different people listen differently, and sort of like, how can you use your ear as a focal thing, and can you focus in on a specific part, or as you say, ignore a part. And then you see some people that can't do that. They just sort of see the entirety of the thing, and they haven't yet developed that ability to push their ear further into the specifics. And so, yeah, it's been really fun to kind of just observe that in different people. And especially in music production, it's very much about ear training, and like, how do you tune into, do you like this kick drum sound or that one, or like what makes a hip hop song feel hip hop, and the drums, okay, well, look, the 808, like someone actually asked me, one of my students thought that they saw this thing on the side, 808 drum, 909 drum, and they're like, is that some kind of like musical is that like key signature or thing? And you're like, oh no, it's actually a drum machine, and this was the history of that drum machine, and how the 909 got adopted by the house and the techno, let's say, and the 808 was kind of more hip hop and that big boomy kick drum, and then it just sort of became this whole thing, and then they started listening to the music differently, and like, oh, so this drum comes from a thing, and that's a part of this thing, and it's got a history. And so that, I think, is really fascinating to
the personality of electronic sounds, and how, and that is so important for me, especially when as I piece together the history of things in music and try to tie, that sounds like a Japanese producer in 1996.
yeah,
Like I can almost get to that point, but I can't necessarily, because I'm not a producer, I can't necessarily name the instrument.
yeah, right.
Like, that's a Prophet 5,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
that's
Well, some of it's a lot blurrier, but I know that,
yeah.
the fundamentals, and even like for me, and we harken back to it earlier in this conversation, like when we were all racing with the buy and sell to buy these different bits of information, these different instruments, that a lot of the early electronic music, it was created on all these discarded instruments that the musicians in the 80s got sold, and they failed at what they did. Like, these drum machines were supposed to replace a real drummer, and then you realize, well, it doesn't really sound like a real drummer, and then like all these people dumped these things because they didn't do that. And like, or the 303, like that was supposed to replace the bass player in your band and you could practice, and then it never did that. And then they were all, discarded and found in pawn shops and secondhand stores for next to nothing. And those were the things that then birthed all these styles of music, came from these discarded instruments. And you had acid house come in, acid techno come from this magic 303 box that was like a discarded bass instrument that was supposed to replace the bass player in your band.
Yeah.
And it became, that sound became its own thing. Or the 808, the 909, the DX7. There were certain iconic instruments along the way that often were discarded stuff because no one liked them for what they
Not
were
the
originally
DX7
created for. Exactly.
or a saxophone sample. Oh, it's good times, man. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you spending some time with me. I know you're really busy. And again, I really appreciate it. I wanted to say thank you online. Thank you so much for
Oh,
letting me put some of your music on vinyl. This is such a special project, and it meant so
yeah.
much for me. So I really wanted to appreciate it
Oh,
and
it's a total honor. I'm so
tell you.
stoked that someone out there, connected around the stuff that I made, and wanted to kind of give it another life or a different kind of, yeah, blooming. So I
Yeah,
thank you all. It's all you crazy music collector fans that have kept us all alive, and so I totally appreciate that. And
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much, man.
People wrote to me when you re-released that old vinyl. Like I got all sorts of people from all over writing to me, expressing their joy at rediscovering some of this stuff. And that was really, I appreciate it.
That was cool, man. Yeah, that means a lot. I mean, you were one of the most special releases I have. I don't want to single you out because there was a lot of special releases. They were all special in their own way, but with your unboxing video that you did,
Oh
and
yeah.
I mean all that stuff was cool. Doing the video, which I don't know if you ever got a chance to see the Vapor video. I did put it online. I'll have to
Oh,
send
I
you.
did. I thought it
You
was
did.
incredible. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
really blown away. Like amazing. That was
yeah.
really, really
So
cool.
that was special. So I like
Yeah.
to do a little bit extra, but there's more to do, and there's more. I'm glad we're friends and we can help each other, and I'm looking to grow our relationship more as we go on. My favorite track of your all's time is Wingate.
Oh, okay.
1411.
Yeah.
That sounds like you're like an astronaut has of a rendezvous at a moon at a space station at a moon.
Ooh,
That's
nice.
what that sounds like to me
Yeah.
because there's this minimalism, starkness, there's this abstract, and there's almost like a void of sound,
Mm.
if that makes sense. There's
Yep.
almost as much space as there is sound in parts. And then it's so dramatic at the end. And it hits that, it only does it like once, and it hits that crescendo of a melody that's just
Oh, neat. Yeah.
magical.
Yeah, that was actually one of the pieces that ended up on that Earth cassette. That was the first
Oh,
kind of time it got to public. I had done this live jam, and that was woven in with all the other like bird samples and noises and stuff. And that was the first time it got released was on that cassette. So
special
that's
music, man.
neat that you connect
Yeah.
around that one. So cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'm writing some more ambient stuff like that, and like some of the stuff in Journey to the Sun. Like, it's on my list because I love it. I've been setting up my studio with all the analog bits and kind of getting a more of an improv like setup where I can just like start loops and things going and just kind of get lost in the sound bath of all this stuff. So,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that was going to be the last thing I was going to tell you. We hope for
yes,
more
no,
ambient albums and
I
stuff from
love
you.
ambient music. It's funny. I got to get this little new dub project out of the way and birth to the world, but that'll be my next release, hopefully by the fall. We'll
If
see
you
how much time I've got. All these other artists that I'm trying to help them finish their things, but it's definitely, yeah, I want to do some more deep ambient stuff.
Good stuff. If you need any help with the label, not necessarily my label, but if you need any ideas of a
Awesome.
label that could share it with your label and
Oh,
get
cool.
pressed for
Yeah, I'll
you,
definitely reach out. We'll definitely
yeah,
have
if I
another
can give you
conversation
any
around
tips
that.
on a good label to go with,
Oh,
that will
cheers.
get you some new fans and
Yes,
help spread your
absolutely.
music. Just let me know if you need need a person. And also I'll keep watching your vlogs. So continue success with that, and I'll put your
Awesome.
link down below so people can follow you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Adam. I really appreciate your time again. Thank you so
Oh,
much, man.
total pleasure. Total
All right,
pleasure.
take care,
Thank
buddy.
you. All right.
How's it going, everybody? Adham Shaikh here with Rediscovery Records unboxing. Very excited. Ooh. And a nice ambient shirt. Thanks. Wow. Full package here. Boy, things here. Yeah. Look at that. Double vinyl too. I kind of forgot. It was a double. This is only the third vinyl that I've ever done, so it's pretty special. Wow. Oh, nice. Look at that. Oh, they even got, yeah, respect to Rediscovery Records. Did a beautiful job. Does it just start by itself?
Crank it.
Hey?
Crank the volume.
I wrote this song in 1992. That's like 30 years ago.